Chapter 758. Taoist Clearwater hesitated. You entered the Cloud Mountain and came out alive. I guess there are two reasons. Either you're not the one we're looking for, or you are standing on Elder Yunshan's side. That was why he was able to survive. No matter which one is true, you'd better die. Li Yunshin shrugged. Now you know I'm not the person you're looking for. What else is there to say? But you are more suitable than the person we are looking for. Taoist Clearwater said solemnly, I'm not a puppet that only listens to others, I have my own judgment. The fact that you have feelings for Lu Gongzan means that you are not a completely evil person. On the contrary, you might be kinder than most people. Li Yunshin laughed. After laughing for a while, he finally said, to be able to flatter me without batting an eyelid, you're indeed suited to be a leader. Taoist Qing Shui ignored his teasing and looked at him. Bai Yanjun hasn't shown up to see you for quite some time. That was the time when I had the most contact with you. A few days ago, Bai Yanjun came to find you again. This means that he agrees with my judgment of you. Haven't you realized it? I knew Black Bai Yanjun was related to Qin Zhao. Li Yunshin pursed his lips. The possession method was Qin Zhao's, but Bai Yanjun was the one who taught me. I'm not that stupid. So now, bringing me to Dragon Island is also the result you want? This brings me to the second thing Qin Zhao told me. Taoist Qing Shui said seriously. She also told me that although I was guarding the land and Lin Long was guarding the door of the Dragon Island. But after many years, perhaps both of us will change our minds. If I am in cahoots with the Freemasons, then call Lin Long to punish me. If Qilin Dragon is restless and is no longer satisfied with guarding the Dragon Island, and wants to put other things above her responsibilities, then tell me to punish her. I haven't changed, but the Kirin Dragon has. She wanted to conquer the world. If it was just to seize the world, perhaps I would help her out of consideration for the friendship we shared, so that I would also have a helping hand. But she wants to open the netherworld. This is seeking her own death. But the Qilin Dragon controls the Dragon Island. Though I knew much more of these things than she did, I dared not risk myself. I knew the power of the things Qin Zhao was talking about. I couldn't have come to the ocean without 100% certainty. That's why you're the vanguard. Now that you are on the Dragon Island, you are afraid that I will seize the Dragon Island. You are overthinking things. If I was afraid, why would I tell you what happened before? I can totally trap you and the Qilin Dragon inside. You're still trying to persuade me. Li Yunshin smiled and said, but now, these words are more credible. Taoist Clearwater sighed, I just don't want to waste my time. You told me that you were engaged to Bai Yunshin and that you went to see Jin Peng. But my men haven't received any news. Perhaps it meant that you left no traces behind when you did things, or it meant that you were stalling for time. I thought about it and think it's the latter. If it's the latter, it means that you want to stall me and buy some time for yourself. Then you can use this time to think of other methods. Your methods are very powerful. I will be in a terrible situation if I want to resolve them. It will be a waste of energy and time, but it will actually help the 10,000-year ancestor. No matter which one of us is guarding the Dragon Island, we can't let it fall into his hands. That's why I'm trying to persuade you. Taoist Clearwater looked sincerely at Li Yunshin. What else is suspicious about what I said to you? Li Yunshin sighed. At first, when the 10,000-year ancestor and I talked for a long time, I also didn't think he was suspicious and wanted to believe him. But I was tricked. Until now. Before he could finish, he realized that Taoist Clearwater, the Purple Knight Immortal, and Lu Gongzan all turned to look at the door of the Penglai Island Hall. He listened carefully and heard someone calling the door from outside. Taoist Clearwater glanced at the Purple Knight Immortal and waved her hand. The hall returned to darkness. But the strange thing was, Li Yunshin could still see what was happening there. It seemed that she knew more than him about certain things. The person who called was Qin Fengzi. The Purple Knight Immortal understood Taoist Clearwater's intention. He paused for a while and said in a deep voice, Junior, come in. Qin Fengzi pushed the door open and entered. The moonlight shone on the ground, allowing Qin Fengzi to see the Purple Knight Immortal's face clearly. On the other hand, Lu Gongzan and Taoist Clearwater retreated to the back and hid in the darkness. What's the matter? Someone broke into Penglai Island. Qin Fengzi breathed heavily and said, Immortal told me to leave, so I went to guard the hall. Then I had nothing to do, so I decided to meditate for a while. When I was daydreaming, I suddenly felt something strange in the southeast, so I went to take a look. I happened to see 3 people coming to Penglai Island. None of the senior and junior brothers guarding the island noticed them. They accidentally triggered the magic circle I set on the side of the island, so I saw them. The Purple Knight Immortal's face turned cold. 10,000 years old ancestors' men? Can you tell what level they are? They don't look like old ancestors' men. Qin Fengzi looked behind him. They are too far away so I can't see their faces. But their cultivation level should be very high so I don't dare. Before he finished, the Purple Knight Immortal Lu Gongzan and Taoist Clearwater shouted in unison, "Stay your hand." Then, 3 rays of mystic light shot out from their hands and enveloped Qin Fengzi. Almost at the same time, a dazzling light burst out from Qin Fengzi's back. Even with the mystic light protecting his body, he was still hit and flew into the hall, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Lu Gongzan had already jumped out of the hall and shouted, "Ninth young master, Red Lady Miss Bai, it's me." Only then did he see clearly that there were 3 figures floating in the air outside the palace. 2 in white and 1 in red. They were the 9th young master, Red Lady, and Bai Yunxin. The 3 seemed to be shocked when they saw Lu Gongzan's appearance. Before the 2 women said anything, the 9th young master shouted, "How did you come here and talk?" Lu Gongzan said in a deep voice, "Brother XN is fine. This place." He looked behind him. "It's not a dangerous place anymore." Taoist Clearwater also walked out slowly. He smiled and raised his voice, "We are friends now." The 9th young master stared at Lu Gongzan for a while, then stared at Taoist Clearwater for a while. He seemed to be wondering if Lu Gongzan was telling the truth. In this world he was the one who understood the friendship between Li Yunxin and Lu Gongzan the best. When Li Yunxin was still young, he had tried to stop him from harming Lu Gongzan in an extremely dangerous situation. Therefore when he saw old Lu's expression, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then his face turned cold. If he's fine, I'll leave." Chapter 759. When he was about to move, Red Madam said in a low voice, "Isn't it a dangerous place with her here?" She looked at Taoist Qing Shui. "Li Yunxin asked me to stop you, but you want to harm him. Lu Gongzan, you've been bewitched by her, haven't you?" Old Lu smiled bitterly. "Brother XN, you should say it." He looked at Taoist Qing Shui when he said that. Taoist Qing Shui smiled, returned to the hall and waved his hand. The hall was lit up again, and Li Yunxin's appearance appeared in the void. Red Madam and Bai Yunxin landed on the wide platform in front of the hall, and they could see him. He was in a secret room that wasn't dark, and he had a unique smile on his face. However, he did not speak to the 2 women first. Instead, he raised his eyes and looked up as if by doing so, his line of sight would fall on the person in the sky outside the hall. "Ninth young master, you're still angry with me." Li Yunxin sighed with a smile. "We've been through life and death for so many times, and you've been angry for so many days. It's time to let it go. New year, new atmosphere." 9th young master's voice came from outside the hall. "Angry? Oh, I don't want to be angry with you. You don't see me as a friend, so what's there to be angry with? I'm leaving." Li Yunxin hurriedly said, Wait, why don't I see you as a friend?" 9th young master immediately said, "You deliberately made me leave in the water, didn't you?" Li Yunxin was stunned. "What do you mean?" "Little you told me." 9th young master landed angrily, and walked to the door of the hall to look at Li Yunxin. "She said you knew there would be a big battle later and you were afraid that I would die there, so you made me leave." "Bah! I've told you, what's there to be afraid of? You don't see me as a friend?" 9th young master, "I wasn't there." Lu Gongzan laughed. "It's not that Brother XN doesn't treat you as a friend. Rather, he felt that he had a chance of winning and that's why he sent you away. He'll only ask you to help him when he really needs you. Just now, Brother XN told me that he was unable to handle the upcoming battle and needed the help of his old friend. I came and I knew you would come. I was worried about you at that time, but now I'm really scared. Now that I see it, I misjudged the 9th young master. Brother XN understands you better than I do. Now that you're here, it's really a great help. Both Brother XN and I are very happy. I think we shouldn't fuss about the past." The 9th young master stared at Li Yunxin. "Did you really say that?" Li Yunxin nodded. "Alas, I had no choice at that time." The 9th young master pretended to hesitate for a while, and then waved his hand. "Then forget it." After saying this, he lifted his foot and walked into the hall. "After I left, I also thought it through. Little you, said that there's no hatred for no reason, and there's no love for no reason. Even if you schemed against me before, we were in different positions. Later on we became friends, so we don't have to worry about the past. But this time, if you're not a good friend, don't blame me." He walked into the door and saw the Taoist. "You're the owner of Southwood House?" Taoist Clearwater only smiled. But at this moment, the smile turned into a mask again. Red Lady and Bai Yunxin stared at the 9th young master as he walked into the door. After confirming that he was safe and sound, they felt slightly relieved. Red Lady said, Li Yunxin, what happened? Li Yunxin smiled. Ancestor, 10,000 years old ancestor released the news, intending to lure you here and use you to threaten me. But he didn't expect me to be so fast. Until now. That's not what I'm asking, Red Madam said stiffly as she looked at his image. Li Yunxin was slightly stunned, and then his eyes fell on the Taoist. You mean her? We're not enemies now. I told you to stop her. Red Lady paused. It's not her either. Li Yunxin blinked. That's... Li Yunxin, I'm here on the order of King Rock to ask you. At this time Bai Yunxin spoke again. When they landed on the ground, both her and Red Lady's complexion didn't seem very good. Li Yunxin thought it was because they didn't know the current situation and were worried about him. But at this time he slowly found that things might be different from what he thought. Red Lady looked angry, but Bai Yunxin was very calm. But there seemed to be something else under her calm expression. When he interjected, his tone was also serious. It was a businesslike tone. She used such a tone to say the following words. When do you plan to arrange our marriage? Red Lady turned her face and stared at her. She answered Li Yunxin's doubts with her actions. It was her. The smile on the Taoist's face was still calm. But if this smile was a mask, it would probably be thicker when she heard this sentence. What Li Yunxin said before was not nonsense. He really met Golden Rock and discussed with him about the marriage with Bai Yunxin? And Li Yunxin opened his eyes wide. He first looked at Bai Yunxin, to make sure she was not joking, and then looked at the Red Lady. Finally he turned his eyes to Lu Gongzan. And he shouted in his heart. What the hell? Before, he told Taoist Qing Shui that he met Golden Rock and Golden Rock wanted to marry his daughter. It was all nonsense. It was because when he mentioned Golden Rock, old Lu hinted to him with his eyes, implying that he had done something here. Li Yunxin knew that old Lu was capable, so he guessed that he must have looked for an opportunity to contact Golden Rock's people on land, or maybe he had already called for help. Because of this, he talked nonsense and coaxed Taoist Qing Shui to wait for a while, so that he had time to consider whether to believe her or not, so that she would not dare to act rashly towards Lu Gongzan. Who would have thought that it would come so fast, and it seemed that it really happened. He was in a daze for a while. This was one of the few times when he was really in a daze and not pretending to be in a daze for others to see. In the past he would probably just smile and ignore them. But when Red Lady was on the sea, she accompanied him through fire and water. Although at that time he was confident about the future, Red Lady didn't know that although she was a demon, many of the things she did were out of obsession. But such sincerity, if she was not a real evil person, how could she not remember it? Bai Yunxin also saved his life. Although that kind of kindness might just be something that a demon did because she thought it was fun. But after that, he gradually understood and remembered that there were some other feelings. It was not like he had not flirted with her before. And now, he used the name of Golden Rock. It was fine under other circumstances, but there was the Taoist Qing Shui. He denied it. With the character of Bai Yunxin, he did not know what she would do. The Taoist Qing Shui would also know that what he said before was indeed nonsense. At that time, if the Taoist Qing Shui was really not trustworthy, and if Bai Yunxin really did something unexpected, the situation would be very bad. Chapter 760. Even though Li Yunxin was quick-witted, he couldn't think of a solution now that he was on the Dragon Island. He could only stare at Lu Gongzan. Old Lu, why did you do this? The ninth young master's reaction was slower than everyone else's. When he saw that everyone's expression wasn't right, he shouted in surprise, Eh? Li Yunxin, my sister told me that you guys already... Red Madam scolded him, shut up. The ninth young master glared at her, but he didn't continue. He just snorted and walked to the side. Old Lu felt uncomfortable being stared at by Li Yunxin, so he could only say, this is what happened. But his expression was awkward. As if he didn't expect something. At this time, someone that Li Yunxin didn't expect broke the awkward atmosphere. Taoist Qing Shui's expression didn't look good, even if it was covered by a smile. The smile on her face disappeared. She frowned. Something's wrong. Li Yunxin couldn't wait for someone to say something. He also frowned. His expression was very serious. What's wrong? It shouldn't be unknown. Taoist Qing Shui took a deep breath and looked at him. I didn't dare to come to the Dragon Island myself because I was afraid that the lifeless immortal sect had many eyes and ears. I knew that my whereabouts would definitely be noticed and reported to Lin Long. But they went deep into the ocean and landed on Peng Lai at such a sensitive time. Why didn't anyone notice? She turned around and looked at Zai Jinren. You said that the 10,000-year ancestor was already suspicious of you. He didn't even ask you to participate in the protective formation in the vast ocean. Zai Jinren was startled. He immediately said in a low voice, "Then if the 10,000-year ancestor wanted to purposely let them into the ocean and use them to threaten Li Yunxin to leave the Dragon Island? He wouldn't let them into this Penglai Island. Unless he wants to catch them all in one fell swoop here," Lu Gongzan continued. After listening to the conversation between Daoist Qing Shui and Zai Jinren, he already roughly understood the situation. Although this wasn't good news. But Li Yunxin sincerely felt that even if Taoist Qing Shui's deduction was true, it was simply too wonderful. On the other hand, Red Lady and Bai Yunxin had a doubtful look on their faces. "You mean?" The sky suddenly darkened. Tonight was supposed to be a bright and clear day. A crescent moon hung high in the sky, reflecting the sparkling surface of the ocean. On the stone platform outside the hall, there was also the watery moonlight. Even for mortals, if they had good eyesight, they would be able to see the person in front of them clearly. But in the blink of an eye, the crescent moon disappeared. Thick dark clouds quickly gathered in the sky. It was so vast that not only did it cover Penglai Island, but it also extended all the way to the ends of the sea and sky, spanning tens of thousands of miles. It was as if a huge lid was pressing down on them. Not only did it make the air become heavy, but it also made the spiritual power between heaven and earth stagnant, as if it would break into pieces in the void in the next moment and fall down. The thick clouds rotated rapidly in the sky, and the people in Penglai Hall really didn't care about the matter they had talked about before. They all stepped out of the hall and looked up at the night sky. They saw that the thick clouds seemed to be stirred by a pair of big hands, slowly rotating, bringing up a whistling wind. It only took 3 or 4 breaths, then it condensed into a huge face. The crescent moon was behind the face of the thick clouds. Light leaked out from the gaps that formed the eyes, nose and mouth. It was no longer as bright as before but more ghostly. This face was like a demon god from the outer world, overlooking all living beings. 10,000-year ancestor. Zai Jinren lowered his voice. At this time he didn't care about the taboo anymore. He drew a talisman in the void with his hand, as if he wanted to contact Nanmuju, who was lurking beside the 10,000-year ancestor. However, as soon as the talisman appeared in the air, it was immediately blown away by the whistling wind. In the high sky, a thunderous laughter came. "Ha! Zai, do you really think that I don't know about the people you've planted?" His smile made everyone feel dizzy even though they had a high cultivation base. It was as if hundreds of gongs and drums were beating beside their ears. The wind became stronger and stronger. Not only was the sand and stones on the ground flying, but many huge trees were uprooted by the wind and flew everywhere in the air. Penglai Hall, on the other hand, could stand in the wind because it wasn't made by the craftsmen of the central continent. However, the 10,000-year ancestor who had refined the godly demon body, was actually this powerful? Zai Jinren's expression changed drastically. Now that he had returned to the profound realm, he was still one of the top masters in the world. However, to be fearless in the face of danger, one had to see how dangerous it was. With his current realm, he would subconsciously feel a sense of powerlessness when he looked up at the sky. He clearly knew that this was because the difference between their realms was too great. Daoist Qing Shui showed a calm demeanor at this moment. She also raised her hand and pointed a few times in the air like Zai Jinren. However, she didn't draw any talismans. Instead, she summoned an image that Li Yunxin could see. Then she raised her voice and said, 10,000-year ancestor, are you going to kill me all at once? The demon god in the night sky laughed again. I won't let go of any of the things that the girl left behind. When she came to my island she was quite rude to me. I've tolerated her until today but I can't tolerate it anymore. If you know what's good for you, hand over Penglai and Dragon Island, and then hand over all the secret manuals. If you don't. At this moment, the world was filled with the cries of ghosts and howls of gods, and the wind and clouds surged. The pressure of the 10,000-year ancestor made everyone feel suffocated, and they felt that the circulation of their spiritual energy was sluggish. Although everyone except Zai Jinren was fearless, they were still standing on the ground and talking to him. But now he was obediently standing on the ground, raising his head to talk to him, instead of soaring into the air to look at him. It was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. At this time there was only one person who could still be considered calm. Li Yunxin was on Dragon Island, so he naturally couldn't feel his pressure. From his point of view, such a scene was far better than the scene of the two women who had fallen in love with him messing around. Thus he sighed and his voice traveled into everyone's ears. I said, ignore him. This person isn't some 10,000-year ancestor anymore. Daoist Qing Shui frowned. You mean, this is someone else's bluffing? That's not what I meant. Li Yunxin waved his hand. Listen to what stupid things he said. If you know what's good for you, then hand over whatever you have right now. He knows you won't, but he still said that. Either he's arrogant and only wants to show off his power, or he's a street thug and doesn't want to fight and only wants to bicker. When I was talking to the 10,000-year ancestor, he wasn't like this. I can only say that after refining that corpse, his mind changed greatly, and he's no longer the same person as before. He only knows about the past. What else is there to say at a time like this? Come in and think of a solution. Stop nagging. The 6 of them already felt that the pressure from the demon god in the sky was unbearable. Hearing Li Yunxin say that, it was as if a heavy burden was lifted from their shoulders, and they immediately entered the hall. Li Yunxin stared straight at Hong Yang and Bai Yunxin. When the 2 of them also entered, he let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 761. But the noises outside the hall didn't stop. It was unknown what kind of divine ability was used, but the giant rocks and trees that were dancing wildly in the air smashed into the hall, causing the entire hall to rumble. Scoundrels! You can escape through the door, but can you escape from my ocean? Ah! His arrogant voice sounded heavy to others, but to Li Yunxin, it made him feel more comfortable. He didn't dare to delay. He was afraid that the 2 monsters would mention something else. He immediately said to Daoist Qingshui in a deep voice, "Have you thought about what to do if something like this happens?" "Yes," Daoist Qingshui said briefly. As she spoke, she walked to the wall of the hall and tapped her finger on the wall like a gust of wind. The wall glowed with white light. Halos spread under her fingertips one after another. Lines and columns of runes began to roll on the wall, almost forming a dense black shadow. Previously, Daoist Qingshui said that Chen Zhao told her some about the control method of Penglai and Dragon Island. At that time, Li Yunxin thought that she was exaggerating. She should know that she was one of the people in this world who understood the way of thinking in Chen Zhao's previous world the most. But now, seeing what Daoist Qingshui was doing, he felt a chill in his heart. Others in the hall couldn't see it and only thought that she was setting up a magic circle to cast a supernatural power. But Li Yunxin knew what she was doing. What he clicked in the secret room of the Dragon Island was nothing more than some preset programs. Even for those things he was far from touching the core. But what Daoist Qingshui was doing now was far beyond the preset programs. From Li Yunxin's limited perspective, which was limited to his original world, she was programming. He had a strange feeling of absurdity in his heart. In such a world, on such a desolate sea, in such an environment, there were gods and demons roaring outside, and demons standing around inside, but Daoist Qingshui was programming. As Daoist Qingshui's fingertips flew, a low buzzing sound came from outside the hall of Penglai Island. The voice of the 10,000-year-old ancestor in the sky gradually became softer, as if it was getting further away. But only Li Yunxin knew that she must have activated something to gradually isolate the sound. True enough. Clearwater Daoist hurriedly said, "I originally wanted to convince you to let me control the Dragon Island. At that time, no matter how powerful the 10,000-year ancestor becomes, we will be able to protect ourselves." Then I found Chen Zhao and asked her what she should do next. It's just, she turned to look at Li Yunxin. "I didn't expect you to be so difficult to convince." Li Yunxin frowned, a few thoughts forming in his mind. However, he had always known that he had to be more cautious at times like this. In an extremely tense situation, the range of one's thoughts and vision would become extremely narrow. What he thought and saw was only what others told him to see. He was accustomed to this method of dealing with others and he knew its dangers. So he temporarily suppressed those thoughts and began to ask himself a few questions. To deal with the current critical situation, what should be done according to Daoist Qingshui's words? It's time to leave the Dragon Island and give the Dragon Island to her. Find Chen Zhao and ask her what she's going to do next. This meant that she could use Dragon Island to contact Chen Zhao. Did he want to see Chen Zhao's true face? Yes. These 2 points were legitimate reasons for him to convince himself to leave the Dragon Island. But if he thought deeper, what if the current critical situation was what Daoist Qingshui wanted him to see? Was there a possibility that the Clearwater man was bluffing and this was a ploy? Yes. And the possibility was very high. Thinking of this, Li Yunxin gradually calmed down. He slowly stood up and was silent for a while. Then Daoist Qingshui turned to look at him again. "You still don't believe me?" Li Yunxin was still silent. Daoist Qingshui sighed and turned her face again. "Fine. I know you're a cautious person. I'll stay here now. Tell me." Li Yunxin suddenly sighed. "How do I get out?" Daoist Qingshui was stunned and turned her face. "What? Didn't you want me to get out? Li Yunxin said. I'll let you have Dragon Island. The ninth young master, Red Lady, and Bai Yunxin did not know what they were talking about, but Lu Gongzan did. He frowned and said in a low voice, Brother XN, we have. Li Yunxin waved his hand, indicating that he should not persuade him. Taoish Qingshui looked at him and smiled meaningfully. I thought you would think that this is all a trap that I've set up for you. I have. Li Yunxin paused. If it's really a trap, you win. On your side, there are only a few people in this world who treat me well. I can't take the risk and leave them there while I hide here. Li Yunxin stared at Taoish Qingshui, unwilling to give up. Li Chunfeng broke my state of mind for you. He's really a good dog for you. Taoish Qingshui smiled and nodded. You can only act like a human after breaking your state of mind. Taishang like Daotong and Kenzo, what's the point of living? You should thank me for letting you know that this world is more interesting than you can imagine. Now click. A green ring appeared in front of Li Yunxin. There was a red dot in the middle. He stared at the ring for a while and looked at Lu Gongzan. Old Lu stared at it and shook his head. He clicked on it. He didn't feel anything strange, nor did he feel any discomfort. It was more like the scene in front of him suddenly changed. His surroundings darkened. Then he heard the howling of the wind and the crackling sound. In the blink of an eye, he was already in a forest that was about to be destroyed. Li Yunxin immediately looked up and saw the huge face in the sky. He knew that he was on Penglai Island. When he was in the secret room on Dragon Island, he didn't feel the pressure of the 10,000-year-old ancestor. But at this moment he truly experienced it. This should be a dense forest on Penglai Island. The towering trees had grown for an unknown period of time. They were so tall that they couldn't see the top. They were as thick as a huge vat. The leaves were lush and there wasn't much light during the day. But now, most of the giant trees were broken in half and swept up into the sky. Those that were lucky enough to stay on the ground couldn't escape the fate of being destroyed. There seemed to be a terrifying corrosive power in the air. Li Yunxin could see the thick tree trunks were rapidly weathering and becoming brittle. It was as if they were condensed from dust. They were blown away into a dense fog and were swept into the thick clouds in the sky in the blink of an eye. He had come into contact with the aura of the netherworld, so he could sense that there was also a domineering aura here. Chapter 762. But compared to the Kirin dragon, it was very faint. It should have come from the thick clouds in the sky. However, this meant that the strength of the 10,000-year-old ancestor was far stronger than the refined Kirin dragon and Zither master. What he felt now was the netherworld aura that was escaping from the body of the 10,000-year-old ancestor. It had already enveloped Penglai and could be detected by others. The difference between thousands of years and tens of thousands of years could be seen now. Li Yunxin carefully used his supernatural power to look into the distance. In the dark night, he saw the Grand Hall on the main peak of Penglai Island. The inside of the Grand Hall was as bright as day. But looking from the outside, there was no light at all. It was like a giant beast lying on the top of the mountain. Li Yunxin glanced at it and planned to go to the main peak in the night. But just as he moved his gaze away, he made a sound of surprise and turned back. Just now, he seemed to have seen something moving in the shadows of the main hall. In fact, the main hall was shrouded in a ball of shadow. Countless giant trees and rocks were smashing into the hall. But with the help of the spirit, his eyesight was very good. Therefore he found something unusual. In the northeast and southwest corners of the Grand Hall, something was slowly coming out. The thing that came out looked short and thick. It was not even as big as the giant trees dancing in the wind. But in the irregular shadow, it was enough to attract Li Yunxin's attention. He thought of one thing. Ordinarily, such a scene in such a place would not have given it a thought. But after seeing the ability of the Taoist of Qingshui, he felt that his thought might be true. Therefore he stopped and didn't fly up. At this time, the illusion of the 10,000-year-old ancestor was still roaring above the clouds. It was like an enraged beast roaring in its own territory. When it first appeared, its words were clear, although it seemed a bit stupid to Li Yunxin. But now, although it was still roaring, its voice was blurred. Their words were carried by the wind, and only a few short sentences or words could be heard. Li Yunxin took the opportunity to listen attentively for a while and realized that it was nothing more than a threat. Therefore he guessed that the real 10,000-year-old ancestor might not have successfully refined it. Knowing that Kirin Dragon was dead and that Daoist Qingshui had arrived at Penglai, the others had also fallen into his trap. Therefore he displayed his ferocious look in order to intimidate everyone. But even if it was a clone of this level, the pressure it brought was enough to make people tremble in fear. Just as he was thinking about this, he suddenly heard the voice of Taoist Qingshui in the strong wind. Ancestor, I'm guessing that you haven't finished your work yet. Aren't you afraid of ruining your plans by coming out at this time? I advise you to quickly withdraw this illusion. We can discuss this matter at length. Don't ruin your tens of thousands of years of cultivation just because of a moment of impulse. Her voice was shrill. In the howling wind, it was like a thin string pulling a kite. Although it looked like it would break at any moment, it continued to sway upwards, allowing everyone who wanted to hear it clearly. Her tone now was different from when she was in the hall. Although she was still calm back then, she lacked confidence. But now, there was a hint of steadiness in her calmness, as if she had something to rely on. Li Yunxin deduced that she should have already entered the Dragon Island. He didn't know if he would regret his decision. But he could take this opportunity to see what Daoist Qingshui could do. Judging from her tone now, if the illusion didn't withdraw and continued to show off its power, Daoist Qingshui would make her move. He couldn't help but stare at the two thin tubes that extended from the northeast and southwest corners of the hall. The voice of the 10,000-year-old ancestor came from the thick clouds. Ha! Make your move. Let me see. What kind of ability do you have? It was slightly clearer than before. It wasn't hard to guess his intention based on the few words he heard. Li Yunxin thought that he had confirmed one more thing. To the 10,000-year-old ancestor, Daoist Qingshui was a bigger threat than him. She was a bigger threat than having a great sage as her assistant. That was why she couldn't wait to show up here. Her target wasn't him but Daoist Qingshui. After the 10,000-year-old ancestor said this, Li Yunxin thought that Daoist Qingshui would argue with him. But then he saw the two thin tubes that extended from the Penglai Hall glowing faintly. This was his impression just now. At the next moment, before he could figure out what the faintly glowing meant, the peak of the mountain where the Penglai Hall was located suddenly lit up. It was as if the scorching sun at noon in the summer had leaped up from the mountain peak. The dazzling flash made a powerful existence like Li Yunxin temporarily blind. But he quickly used his spiritual power to protect his body and adjusted himself. He saw two strong rays of light piercing through the strong wind and went straight into the clouds in the sky. The thick clouds were originally black. It was because of the crescent moon that the outline of a human face appeared. But at this moment, the clouds that extended all the way to the intersection of the sea and the sky suddenly turned fiery red. It was as if someone lit a fire in the sky, and the clouds ignited when they met the fire and burned into a piece. The trace of the light couldn't be seen. But in the strong wind, there were many stones and giant trees that were rolled up from Penglai Island. When the two strong rays tore through the air, those things were also burned. Therefore, although the strong light disappeared, it left two fiery traces in the air, like two spears that pierced the clouds from the ground. Li Yunxin felt the terrible power. It didn't come from the 10,000-year-old ancestor, but from the light. A roar sounded between heaven and earth. The rolling sound wave blasted down from the cloud mountain, immediately dispersing the violent and raging wind, but pressing them down fiercely. It was as if a god smashed down from the sky. The entire Penglai Island seemed to suddenly become shorter. Then, with a loud explosion, a huge amount of sand and stones flew into the sky. There were many towering peaks on the island. At this moment, the peaks were peeled off a layer of skin. The outermost soil and stones were all blown away by the airwave. Anything that had accumulated on the island over the years was all stripped away. The 10,000-year-old ancestor roared in the clouds, "You!" But on the main peak in the center of Penglai Island, the intact hall burst into light again. Another two strong rays of light went straight into the clouds. The vault of heaven shook and the oceans boiled. Because of this blow, the air became sticky and white, as if it was compressed to the extreme. The clouds in the sky immediately dispersed, and the crescent moon was revealed once again. Outside Penglai Island, only Li Yunxin could still stand. But his feet had been deeply embedded in the ground. The true appearance of the entire Penglai Island was exposed under the moonlight. Li Yunxin wiped the smoke and dust off his face, stared into the distance and then looked at his feet. He gasped. Chapter 763. His feet weren't stuck in the mud. The ground he was standing on was smooth and shiny, shining with a metallic luster under the moonlight. His feet were embedded in the metal. And the entire Penglai Island was shining under the moonlight, as if it was made of pure silver. After an unknown amount of time, this metal island was covered with sand. And the grass and trees took root on the sand, making it look like an island made of earth and stone. Now that the sand and dust had been washed away, the island finally showed its original appearance under the moonlight. The illusion of the 10,000-year-old ancestor in the sky disappeared. Li Yunxin flew up and observed the entire Penglai Island from midair for the first time. Then he was surprised to find that the peaks on the island were arranged in a certain pattern. The highest peak was at the center of the island. It was a perfect cone. But the top half was cut off, and the Penglai Grand Hall and several other palaces were located on it. But now these palaces also took off the disguise. They were semicircular like a few dewdrops. Some of the smaller peaks were also conical in shape. Although the distribution was not symmetrical, Li Yunxin could see that they followed a certain pattern. Such an arrangement must have been considered in terms of functionality. The top of the small peak was also a cross-section, and there were also some dewdrop-like buildings. On the periphery of the island, there were many huge stone pillars. The bamboo garden where Li Chunfeng lived when he was disguised as Huang Guanzi, and the palace where Sheng Guanyu lived were built on the stone pillars on the edge of the island. Now the disguise on the stone pillars was also taken off, revealing their true appearance. They were all metal cylinders of the same thickness and different heights. They were arranged around the island, rising and falling rhythmically like the graphic columns in the audio pattern of the old-fashioned players in Li Yunxin's world. It looked like the island was alive and these columns were its tentacles. Other than that, there was nothing else on the island. It seemed to be a model built by some software showing a kind of absolute simplicity. Li Yunxin remembered the secret room on Dragon Island that he had stayed in not long ago, and realized that the style of the two was the same. At this time, he noticed that there were two spots of light flashing slightly in the main hall of Penglai under the moonlight. He looked carefully and saw two needle-like objects. They were extremely thin, almost disappearing into the air as they emerged from the northeast and southwest corners of the main hall. This should be the weapon that scared away the 10,000-year-old ancestor twice. In the strong wind and dust they looked thicker than they were now. Perhaps it was caused by some strange physical phenomenon. But now, two thin needles were pointed at Li Yunxin. He immediately felt a slight prickling pain between his eyebrows. It was as if someone was poking him with a thin needle. This was his body's instinctive reaction. Before his consciousness, his body had given him a warning. It was a sense of crisis that he had never experienced before. He was well aware that if the same kind of power shot out from the two threads just now, his body would definitely be heavily injured and it would be extremely difficult for him to dodge. However, his expression remained the same as he stared at the two threads from afar. After about 2 or 3 breaths, but Li Yunxin felt that it was a full quarter of an hour, the two thin threads retracted. The prickling pain between his eyebrows disappeared. He breathed a sigh of relief without changing his expression. After a little hesitation, he flew straight to the front of the main hall of Penglai. When he landed on the ground, he found that the door of the main hall was gone. The building shaped like a water droplet had an absolutely smooth surface. He couldn't find any entrance or hear any sound from inside. Li Yunxin used his supernatural power to get closer to take a look and listen. But he still couldn't hear anything, only the sound of the waves that hadn't subsided yet. When he looked at the dew again, he saw nothing. After the raging wind and the violent impact, there wasn't even a dent or scratch on the surface. He stretched out a finger and scratched it with his fingernail, but he felt his fingernail bend. This thing was extremely hard. It was so hard that it was beyond Li Yunxin's understanding. If this thing was used to make magic weapons, although the material of a magic weapon wasn't necessarily stronger, it was chosen according to the supernatural power of the magic weapon. In terms of toughness, it would definitely surpass any magic weapon he had ever seen. It was most suitable for a great fiendish demon to use in battle. But now wasn't the time to think about this. He took a light breath and said in a deep voice, "Qingshui, it's time to call me in." After a while, Daoist Qingshui's voice came from somewhere. As if he was in a good mood because he obtained the Dragon Island, he even felt a little happy. "Are you sure?" Li Yunxin thought for a while and said, "I'm sure." Daoist Qingshui let out an ambiguous laugh. "Good?" As soon as he said that, the surface of the dew melted and a door that could only fit one person appeared. Light shone out from inside. Li Yunxin stepped in without hesitation. He immediately understood why Daoist Qingshui said those two sentences. Hung Yangzi and Bai Yunxin were at daggers drawn. The big demon that prided itself on its identity naturally wouldn't scratch its face or pull its hair like a village woman. They looked at each other silently. A terrifying aura was emitted from both of them. Li Yunxin, who just stepped into the hall, was startled. He turned around and walked away. But the door behind him had already disappeared. He was trapped inside. Hong Yangzi turned around and saw him. She immediately said what she said before, "Li Yunxin, what's going on?" Li Yunxin had no choice but to look for old Lu. Lu Gongzan spread out his hands with a bitter face. Brother X and I, say it. Li Yunxin sighed and looked to the side again. But he couldn't see Daoist Qingshui's figure now. He didn't know what she was doing on the Dragon Island. He didn't mention the Golden Rock before because he was worried that Daoist Qingshui would harm them. But now that Qingshui had obtained the Dragon Island and pointed the weapon at him, it seemed to be a demonstration, but it wasn't activated. This meant that at least for the time being, she didn't have any bad intentions. Now that the situation had come to this, he decided not to let the misunderstanding continue. He hated the kind of misunderstanding that could be resolved as long as it was spoken out, but the protagonist had to hold it back. Lu Gongzan sighed. He cupped his fists at Bai Yunxin and then at Hong Yangzi. Fairies, I'll tell you everything now. Brother Xian doesn't know anything about this. It's all my own fault, Lao Dao. You can beat and scold me if you feel wronged. I knew that Brother Xian was in danger on land. I wanted to do something for him. After thinking about it, I first thought of Miss Bai, then the evil spirit, and finally the Rock King. Miss Bai is Brother Xian's friend. She's affectionate and loyal. The evil spirit didn't treat Brother Xian badly at the foot of the Cloud Mountain. I think he's a decent person. Based on my impression of these two, I guess the Rock King is also a hero. And because of the current situation, I think the Rock King won't ignore the matter on the sea. Chapter 764. Then I found Miss Bai and told her that Brother Xian was thinking about her. Then Miss Bai and the evil spirit went back to King Rock, which led to today's events. At that time, Brother Xian was on the ocean and didn't know anything about it. He salutes to Red Lady again. I didn't know about Red Lady and Brother Xian until later. Now everything happened because of me. Please don't ask Brother Xian anymore. Is indeed. What he says is exactly the same as what Li Yunxin guesses. But before he finishes his words, Red Lady interrupts him. So you also know that you can be a witness. Old Lu blinks his eyes and is stunned. Ha! Red Lady ignores him and looks at Bai Yunxin. Now you know what I said is true. Lu Gongzan can also testify. When you came here, you saw the stone mountain on the sea. Let me tell you, Li Yunxin asked me to decorate it like the Ziwei Palace. I can do whatever I want. We will live there in the future. You don't think it's a good idea and say I lied to you? Now listen to me, did I lie to you? Her words are very explicit. If it is heard by great Confucians and scholars in the secular world, it is an insult to women's morality and shameless. But this is the true nature of demons. They are supernatural and don't follow the rules of mortals. She is also a ghost cultivator with deep love. No one feels strange when she says these words. Instead, they know that she will say it. But Bai Yunxin is the adopted daughter of Golden Rock. According to the hierarchy in the secular world, a princess of Dongting can't compare with her. Because of the feather coat, she made trouble on Mount Cloud several times as a demon. She should be very stubborn. At this time, after listening to Lu Gongzan's words and Red Lady's words, she knows the truth of the matter. Therefore she doesn't speak. She stands tall and straight, showing her graceful figure. She turns her face and only looks at Li Yunxin. There was no sadness or happiness on her face, but there was some anticipation in her eyes. It was as if she wanted to hear what he had to say. Li Yunxin remained silent for a moment before he looked at her and said, Miss Bai? He only managed to say these 3 words before he was interrupted. Bai Yunxin smiled. Sure. With a smile on her face, she slowly took a step back and said, I wish you two a lifetime of love and happiness. After saying these words, he turned around and left. Taoist Clearwater seemed to be watching everything that happened here from the Dragon Island. As soon as Bai Yunxin moved, an exit appeared on the wall behind her. The demoness did not hesitate, nor did she take another look. She flew away. Lu Gongzan immediately shouted, No! Everyone knew what he meant. The 10,000-year-old ancestor's divine technique was about to be completed, but he had suffered a small loss previously. With his current temperament he would definitely be furious. Bai Yunxin wanted to leave, but if she was caught by the 10,000-year-old ancestor, how could she survive? Li Yunxin also thought of this. When he was about to stop her, another person rushed in front of him. This person was out of everyone's expectation. It was none other than Red Lady. Without waiting for Li Yunxin to stop her, Red Lady flew out from the hole. The hole closed immediately. Li Yunxin frowned. Qingshui, what are you doing? Taoist Clearwater's voice came, Calm down. It's better to let them talk about this kind of thing. Aren't you eager to get away? Why are you so emotional now? Li Yunxin snorted. I think you want Jinping not to come. But Taoist Clearwater laughed again and did not say anything. Only the ninth young master stared at him. Humph, what's there to be afraid of? Bai Yunxin is no match for my sister. My little sister helped me vent my anger. No one paid attention to him. Lu Gongzan walked in front of Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin waved his hand. You have your own difficulties. It's none of your business. It's just that red lady and I. He wanted to say, it's not like that. But when he saw the ninth young master staring at him, he knew it would only make things worse, so he had to stop. At this moment, he thought that love was indeed the most unreasonable and troublesome thing in the world. Especially the love between men and women. Since when did he gradually become involved in this kind of thing from a bystander who didn't get involved in anything? He did not even know. He felt that he did not have that kind of feeling from the beginning to the end. But at this moment, there was a strange feeling in his heart. This should not be his feeling. At least it should not be his feeling 1 year ago. Taoist Master Zai did not say a word from the beginning to the end. Only when the atmosphere turned cold did he say, many people dream of having such a troublesome thing like Dragon King. One's life. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Li Yunxin waved his hand. Everyone, don't forget that the 10,000-year ancestor will come looking for trouble soon. Qing Shui, other than the move you used to repel him, is there anything stronger? After saying this, he looked at the corner and saw another person. There was a gentle light in the hall now, and there were no dark corners. Qin Fengzi could be seen sitting against the wall with a blank look in his eyes. Before this, he was sent flying into the hall by a palm when he reported that someone was coming. Although he spat out a mouthful of blood, he was fortunately protected by a few experts and did not lose his life. His face was pale, but his body should be fine. But he did not move or speak and was obviously not regulating his breath. He looked like he had nothing left to live for and did not know what to say. Before this, when Taoist Master Zai sent him to see Lu Gongzan, he said a lot of reasons. But when he brought Lu Gongzan and Taoist Qing Shui here and saw what happened before, he knew that things were different from what he thought. The 10,000-year ancestor was indeed not that 10,000-year ancestor, and Taoist Master Zai was also not that Taoist Master Zai. Even the lifeless immortal sect might not be that lifeless immortal sect. Then what else was real in this world? He was too lazy to regulate his breath and was too lazy to talk. He knew that he couldn't do anything even if he wanted to in the middle of a group of true realm and profound realm experts, so he decided to just watch. To see what they were going to do. Li Yunxin asked Taoist Qing Shui, but Taoist Qing Shui did not reply immediately. So he had the time to look at Qin Fengzi. For a moment he did not know why, but he could not help but say to him, do you feel like you don't know what is real and what is fake? Qin Fengzi's gaze did not change and his posture did not change. It was as if he could not hear him. Li Yunxin did not mind and sighed, I understand your situation. You have been living in the beliefs that others have instilled in you. You can see your surroundings but you don't know that it is all fake. You feel like you are thriving. When you see it clearly you don't know what to do. But you don't have to look like you have nothing to live for. You have to know, in my world, many people have experienced your state when they were in their early 20s. How many 20s did you live without any worries? Now that you are in this situation you are already lucky. Chapter 765. Qin Fengzi finally rolled her eyes and looked at Li Yunxin. She said in a low voice, has Dragon King experienced this before? Li Yunxin thought for a while, you can say that. Qin Fengzi rolled her eyes again. He wondered if she understood what he said. But Li Yunxin knew that this process would be very difficult. At this moment an exit suddenly appeared on the wall. Hong Yang entered the hall. Li Yunxin was about to ask her when he saw Bai Yunxin also came in. He was stunned again. Not because Bai Yunxin came back but because of the expression on her face. She was still very calm but not as calm as before. At that time there was a volcano under the calm surface of the water. Now there seemed to be no grudge in her heart and no reason to be angry. Looking at Hong Yang, there was a smile on her face as if she had accomplished something big. What did she do outside? Even Li Yunxin did not have the confidence to make Bai Yunxin become like this in such a short time, let alone her. Bai Yunxin stared at Li Yunxin for a while, and then a smile appeared on her face. Her smile was as lively as before. Amidst his quick-wittedness, there was a hint of craftiness. There was even something else that Li Yunxin couldn't see through. Then Li Yunxin, I wish you two to be united forever. Li Yunxin frowned and looked at Hong Yang suspiciously. But he saw Hong Yang also smiled, you don't have to be embarrassed now. You too. He was puzzled. He experienced the feelings of those who he had once toyed with in the palm of his hand. What exactly is it? Daoist Qingshui said. Good. Now that everyone is here, we can talk about business. Li Yunxin realized that Daoist Qingshui should know what happened. She might have heard the conversation between Hong Yang and Bai Yunxin outside. It was only when the two of them returned that he spoke. But what did they talk about? With a flash of light in the hall, Daoist Qingshui appeared. But it was not an image, nor was it a projection. He was a genuine Daoist. She seemed to want to use this method to prove to Li Yunxin that she had no ill intentions towards him. The 10,000-year ancestor has been refined. She said bluntly, just now on the Dragon Island, I saw the netherworld aura in the vast sea accumulating into clouds. No one was left alive within a radius of 1,000 miles. Those who guarded him all lost their lives. Then he looked at Li Yunxin. Your friends Emperor Li and Emperor Yi lost half of their ghost soldiers. The two of them had retreated for more than 2,000 li, but they still hadn't left. Do you have anything to say to them? Li Yunxin had to put aside the matter of the two demonesses for the time being. Can you talk to them now? Sure. He thought for a moment and said, he's not worth much right now. Forget it. Good luck to him. Hearing this, the Clearwater man looked at him with interest, then looked at the two demonesses. Then she continued, then I need to tell you the truth. It's hard to make those two attacks again. If I force it, I'm afraid the loss will outweigh the gain. Everyone stilled. Li Yunxin frowned. What do you mean? The Clearwater man looked at Li Yunxin seriously. It's hard for them to understand. But you should know. The Dragon Island is used to guard the entrance to the netherworld. It's not an armed fortress, nor is it a tool of war. Penglai, Yingzhou, and Fanghu Islands are used to support the Dragon Island. You can imagine that the Dragon Island is an extremely sturdy door. The other three islands are the three buttons on the side of the door. They lock the Dragon Island so that the netherworld aura won't gush out. Although it was hard for others to understand. However, everyone understood what he meant when he used such an analogy. I used this Penglai Island to make those two attacks. It's like I had no choice but to remove a button and use it to smash him. After the two attacks, Penglai Island's energy, she paused before saying this word as if she was not used to it, is almost depleted. That's why I said it's hard to make those two attacks again. Li Yunxin thought for a while. I understand. You're saying that if we do the same thing again, we need to use the energy of Yingzhou and Fanghu. But once we use it, the door of the Dragon Island will open, and the netherworld aura will gush out. This situation is even scarier than the 10,000-year-old ancestor. That's right. Everyone in the hall was silent for a while. They understood what Li Yunxin and Daoist Qingshui were talking about. Red Madam thought for a while, looking at the 10,000-year-old ancestor's appearance just now, if we fight with all our might, that was just his illusion. The Clearwater man said patiently, his strength is not even 11% of his real body. He has already mastered it, the illusion can't be compared to him. But he is afraid of the two attacks just now, so he doesn't dare to come forward. We need to think of a solution as soon as possible. After saying this, she went to look at Li Yunxin. The rest of them followed her to look at Li Yunxin. The latter was startled and spread his hands. Don't look at me. I'm already at the end of my rope now. I was tricked into the Dragon Island by the 10,000-year-old ancestor in Qilin. Do you still believe me? Taoist Master Zai smiled. Who dares to look down on you, Dragon King? At that time on the sea, I also thought you were at the end of your rope. Who knew that you actually killed the fake Dragon King of the Nine Seas? He changed to a very sincere tone. Dragon King. My master has repeatedly expressed that he has no ill intentions towards you. Now that we're facing a great enemy, I hope that Dragon King doesn't. Indeed not. Li Yunxin also said very sincerely, I originally planned to take over Shinryu's body. But now the only way out is gone. Otherwise, I can also refine some godfiend body and fight to the death with the 10,000-year-old ancestor. Now, don't count on me. If you can't do anything, then I can only say, let's scatter like birds and beasts. Let's see who's lucky enough to escape alive. Or we can hold on. Wait for the Rock King to come. Maybe the Rock King has already predicted the current situation and has a good plan. Taoist Master Zai went to look at Bai Yunxin. Bai Yunxin shook her head slightly. My godfather will come. But if the 10,000-year-old ancestor is really as strong as Taoist Qingshui said, I'm afraid that the odds of victory are only between 30 and 70. If that's the case, I guess my godfather might not use his full strength. Although these words were disappointing, they were reasonable. The Golden Rock King who had been dormant for 1,000 years had just escaped. He would not immediately fight with his life. Moreover, in the most sinister way, He could still survive if he joined the 10,000-year-old ancestor. He could even wait for an opportunity to make a comeback. Then I have another suggestion. Li Yunxin rubbed his hands and looked at Taoish Qing Shui. You said that you can contact Qin Zhao. Why don't you go find her and ask her? She had played a part in the mess on the ground. She can't let us watch the entrance of the netherworld and be a shopkeeper who doesn't do anything. If I were her, I would have killed the 10,000-year-old ancestor. Then there wouldn't be all these troubles now. Red Lady frowned sensitively. Who is Qin Zhao? Then she said, the former art saint? Is she still alive? Chapter 766. Alive, Daoish Qing Shui said. But in the netherworld. Red Lady glanced at Li Yunxin. But Li Yunxin ignored her. He only looked at Daoish Qing Shui. So? Fine. Daoish Qing Shui sighed. Since everyone said that there's nothing we can do, I can only try this method. But I can't find Qin Zhao immediately. I need to make some preparations. It'll take a day or two. Before anyone else said anything, Li Yunxin already said, that's good. We can see what the Rock King is like in a day or two. I guess the 10,000-year ancestor won't fight for a day or two. Let's just wait patiently. Then he pointed at the wall. How do we go in and out? We can't ask you to open the door every time we go in and out, right? His current state of mind was different from the people around him. He was calmer and calmer than them. But it also seemed like he was saying, since I've handed over the Dragon Island, I might as well give the burden to the people who occupied the Dragon Island. I'm happy to be free. However, he had always done things in an unusual way. Even in such a dangerous situation, it was not particularly surprising for him to reveal such a relaxed state. Daoish Qing Shui frowned. Where are you going? Li Yunxin waved his hand. I'm just going to walk around and take a look. This thing is rare. I've never seen it before. Daoish Qing Shui thought for a moment. I can't ban you from entering and leaving, but I have another way. She raised her hand and quickly pointed in the air. A faint fluorescent light flashed. Now you can all enter and leave the island freely. After saying this, she looked at Li Yunxin. But, Li Yunxin waved his hand. I understand. Where can I go if I leave the island? With this, he pulled Lu Gongzan and walked toward the wall. The moment they were about to hit it, the wall opened automatically and a round door appeared. The two walked out. The ninth young master was stunned and shouted, Hey, why didn't you wait for me? He chased after them. Red Madam and Bai Yunxin looked at each other and also wanted to move. Li Yunxin was like a magnet. Once he left, the others would follow. Daoish Qing Shui saw what was happening. She thought for a while and smiled. Ladies, I advise you to stay here and not talk to him. Red Lady gave her a supercilious look and ignored her. After taking another 2 steps, he heard Daoish Qing Shui say, If you don't listen to my advice, I'm afraid you'll come back dejectedly. Bai Yunxin hesitated for a while. She had never had any dealings with the people of Qing Shui Road before and there was no conflict of interest between them. Therefore she was a little calmer. She turned around and asked, Why? Daoish Qing Shui smiled and paced around with her hands behind her back. You two young ladies don't really understand men. He raised his hand and pointed outside. In my opinion, Li Yunxin is clearly reluctant to part with the two of you. That's why he's trying to avoid you two. He's afraid that you two will force him to make a decision. If you insist on chasing after him and pestering him, perhaps when he loses his temper, he'll be like this, ignoring everything. They say that women are like cats and men are like cats. If you hug the cat too tightly, it will feel sad and want to run away. If you ignore it, it will slowly come to you, but you still have to give it some space. This way it will be easier for everyone to talk. Red Madam also stopped her footsteps. She stared at Daoish Qing Shui suspiciously for a while. You are so kind and considerate of us? Daoish Qing Shui smiled. I don't want to distract Li Yunxin when the enemy is right in front of us. I'm still hoping that he will come up with some brilliant plan to help us escape or even turn defeat into victory. That's why I advise you to give him some time and space. If he comes up with some ideas, he will naturally come back to find you. Bai Yunxin tilted her head and thought for a while. She said, What she said makes sense. Red Lady hesitated for a while and mumbled, Fine, I'll just stay here and watch you. She looked at Daoish Qing Shui. I won't ask you to play any tricks. As soon as Li Yunxin and Lu Gongzan went out, they flew straight up to the sky and reached a very high altitude. Looking down from here, the entire Penglai Island reflected the moonlight and turned into a small shiny ball. Lu Gongzan wanted to say something, but Li Yunxin waved his hand. He first took out the magic treasure Misty Lock Toad Palace, then took out 2 sword arrays and set up several restrictions. Then he said, "This is serious." Lu Gongzan was stunned. "You really don't have any ideas?" Li Yunxin smiled bitterly and spread her hands. "What can I do now that things have come to this?" Lu Gongzan thought for a while. I also thought it's not a big deal." Li Yunxin sighed. "I plan to find the entrance to the netherworld and find Qinzhao. I guess Black Bai Yanjun are her people. She must be very powerful to be able to order them around. Then the things on the ground will be a piece of cake for her. I didn't care about it before, maybe because I was too busy down there. I didn't know there was a 10,000-year-old ancestor. I didn't know Daoist Qing Shui had such a background. It's all because I made a mistake about the identity of Kirin Dragon. Damn it." He said hatefully, "Those people down there, no matter who they are crazy. When I asked Bai Yanjun to help me, I had to be secretive. But if they mentioned the mythological beast Kirin to me a few times, I wouldn't forget it." At this moment, another person rushed up from the direction of Peng Lai. It was none other than the 9th young master. When he was in midair he shouted, "Li Yunxin! Li Yunxin? Where is he?" Li Yunxin and Lu Gongzan were protected by magic weapons and prohibitions. With the cultivation of the 9th young master, he wouldn't be able to see them. He shouted, but he couldn't find them, so he rushed in another direction. His voice came faintly from the wind, probably saying that he wasn't a good friend, didn't like to talk to people, and so on. The two of them looked at him quietly from the sky. When the 9th young master was far away, Lu Gongzan sighed, "Alas! When I was in the city of Wei, I was scared to death when I saw him with my own eyes, a great demon. Later, I thought if one day I had a cultivation and supernatural power that far surpassed him, what would happen if I met him again? But when I saw him again, I didn't feel anything. I didn't expect that this demon was a real person. In this world, there aren't many people who are as sincere to you as he is." Li Yunxin was silent. After a while he said, "Even if I have a plan, it won't work now." He lowered his voice as if it would not be heard by others. "You saw it just now. Daoist Qing Shui doesn't believe that I'm at my wit's end. I have the same thought as her. I don't believe that she's at her wit's end. Otherwise she wouldn't have to get the Dragon Island. She got the Dragon Island, but only scared the 10,000-year-old ancestor away. Then she said that she was at her wit's end? Who would believe that?" Chapter 767. "So, the current situation is that she wants to force me to the last moment and force me to use my own means. In this way I will be completely seen through by her, and I will be led by her in the future. As for me, I have the same idea." Li Yunxin said softly, "This woman can't be trusted. The more sincere she is, the more I feel that there is something strange about it." Lu Gongzan nodded slightly, "I can see that too. So, at the last moment she may abandon us and only protect herself. So, we have to make her puzzled. In this way she will not dare to act rashly, if she really has ulterior motives." Lu Gongzan slightly raised his eyebrows. "So, Brother X, and you still have a way?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then said inexplicably, "When I was over there, I watched a very old TV series." Lu Gongzan knew that he would not say something unimportant at this time, so he listened carefully. In the TV series there was a big villain who obtained a secret book. He mastered the secret book and his kung fu was invincible. The upright hero also obtained the fragments of the secret book and practiced part of it. His kung fu was very high, but not as high as the villain. In the end, the hero and his friends hid in a cave. The villain was looking for them everywhere and the situation was very dangerous. In the end, at the last moment, the hero found the complete part of the secret book and mastered it. In the end, the two of them fought. The hero seemed to have won but also seemed to have lost. In any case, it was either a comedy or a tragedy. But I can't remember the ending." Li Yunxin paused here. Lu Gongzan waited for him to continue. But after waiting for a long time, Li Yunxin did not say anything, only staring at the distant ocean. Only then did he realize that Li Yunxin had finished speaking. He frowned and whispered, "This story it is?" Then he was shocked. "Brother Xian, are you saying that the villain is like a 10,000-year-old ancestor? You wanna know?" He took a step forward in the air. "You want to use the refining method of the 10,000-year-old ancestor? Just like how the Qilin dragon refined itself, would it also refine the netherworld energy into your body? No, this won't do. The 10-millennium-old ancestor refined it for tens of thousands of years, and Kirin also used his method. You said it yourself, even if Shinryu succeeded, they wouldn't be a match for him. Secondly, if you did that, where would you go in the future? Was he really going to open the entrance to the netherworld and fill the world with the netherworld chi? Besides, it's too late to do that now. Also, he looked solemnly at Li Yunxin. Lin Long and Zither Monarch have refined the netherworld energy. Their personalities have changed greatly and they have lost themselves. The 10,000-year-old ancestor had refined the netherworld energy and was no longer himself. We all saw it with our own eyes. At that time, are you still you? Li Yunxin smiled faintly. The method of refining the netherworld energy is actually not that difficult. Lin Long told me a little and I was able to figure it out. As for refining oneself, there are probably only a few people in the world who are more familiar with it than me. I have refined myself into a dragon's body, and now I have refined myself together with the Grand Elder. It's not difficult. Lu Gongzan was about to speak again, but Li Yunxin waved his hand. As for the time, if you really want to do it, it's not too late. On the Dragon Island, Lin Long lost her chi, and it was Zither Monarch who refined her. If Zither Monarch could do it, of course I can do it too. I also have a few ways to ensure that I don't lose my mind. It's just that, what you said. He sighed softly. I really did it. It will be difficult to stay on the ground. If I stay on the ground, the netherworld energy in my body will slowly dissipate. I will become weaker and weaker. Old Lu. He laughed and looked at Lu Gongzan. Do you really think I will do that? Lu Gongzan's expression changed. I misspoke. Li Yunxin shook his head indifferently. So, my only choice is to stay on the Dragon Island or go to the netherworld. I think it's funny. My heart, my way of thinking, my emotional state, are getting closer and closer to humans. But my body is getting further and further away from humans. When I was a human, I felt that I was a different species. Now that I am a demon and do something else, I might still be a different species. He thought for a while. I guess I am destined to be alone. I'm just afraid that the story will end in a tragedy for me. He sighed. That's why I've been thinking for the past 2 days. Did the male lead of that drama win or lose? After listening to his words, Lu Gongzan suddenly had an ominous premonition. He took a step back in the air and carefully sized up Li Yunxin from head to toe. With a thought, he used his divine ability and began to sense his aura. For cultivators, sensing auras was like a mortal reaching out his hand and rummaging around in the clothes of others. But now Lu Gongzan couldn't care less about these taboos. In just a breath's time he suddenly widened his eyes and said with a trembling voice, it doesn't matter. Li Yunxin smiled. You really did it? Li Yunxin didn't say anything. Lu Gongzan's voice trembled. Why did you do it to this extent? Li Yunxin was silent for a while. It's rare for me to have a few friends. Besides, I will eventually go to the netherworld. Lu Gongzan looked at him in a daze. After a while he let out a long sigh. All right. He said, I'll go with you. You won't succeed. Li Yunxin raised his hand and pointed at the ocean that he had been staring at. Lin Long and Zither Monarch refined themselves on Dragon Island. There's netherworld energy there. Ancestor Wan Yen refined that ancient devil because of the netherworld energy that came out of the ocean cave. Right now, I'm just doing some preparatory work. I'm doing some preparations in my body and waiting for the right time. If there's an opportunity, I'll draw the netherworld energy into my body. But I'm not sure how much I can endure and if there'll be an accident. I don't have the energy to do the same thing to you. Even I'm thinking about how to get some netherworld energy from the vast ocean. I've tried drawing formations, but it's drawn from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It's very strenuous to use it to mobilize the netherworld energy. Now I can only steal a little like a thief stealing rice. He smiled. I move them into my pocket one by one. I don't dare to use force. I'm afraid that Ancestor Wan Yin and Taoist Qing Shui will notice. I know what you're thinking. But you can't do this. Lu Gongzan glared at him. Do you want me to watch you gamble with your life? You're not watching. Li Yunxin looked at him. I was injured on Dragon Island and I'm changing my body now. I'm strong in appearance but weak in reality. I want you to protect me. Chapter 768. Ripples suddenly appeared on the surface of the vast ocean that was sparkling because of the moonlight. It was as if a huge underwater beast was about to surface to breathe. The seawater rose up like a small hill. The top of the hill was as smooth as colored glass. The huge black figure slowly rose up from the water. Finally, it broke through the seawater and floated up to the surface. If one didn't look carefully, they would think that it was a sea beast that they had never seen before. It was spindle-shaped and had a smooth surface with chapped patterns. However, it didn't have a mouth, eyes, fins, or limbs. It looked like an egg. However, this egg was ridiculously big. Could fit more than 10 people inside. After floating quietly on the surface of the ocean for a while, this egg suddenly split open. The oval cabin cover moved to the side, revealing an exit. Grandpa D jumped out of the cabin and landed on the boat. His golden hair shone under the moonlight. Looking east from here, one would find that the night sky seemed to be darker there. When the moonlight reached there, it seemed to be swallowed and distorted by some power. It was as if it was shining into deep water. 3 more muffled sounds came from behind him, and the other 3 figures also leaped up. They were in human form, but they were covered with armor. However, with the shape of this armor, it was more appropriate to call it armor. Their bodies were slender, especially at the waist. The first one was mainly yellow and white. The second one was purple and green. The third one was mostly red with some white, yellow, and black mixed in. It was slightly taller than Grandpa D. There should be someone inside. Grandpa D looked east for a while and sighed. We have finally reached this step. Whether we can escape from this sea of suffering will depend on the next few days. After saying this, he raised his foot and stomped on the ground. We can't use it next. Qing Shui should have already reached Dragon Island. We will be discovered by her. The person wrapped in the red armor immediately said, Then, are we going to Dragon Island next? Grandpa D shook his head. No. We have to wait. When the 10,000-year ancestor Qing Shui and Li Yunxin start fighting, the netherworld energy on this sea will be at its peak. At that time your armor will be useful. The person in the red armor didn't seem to be convinced. From her voice it was a woman. She also stomped on the boat and said, We don't need the 2 of them. I can take care of them myself. Now that I have this treasure, I'm already at the Grand Supreme Realm. Why must I wait until then? Old Master D seemed to treat her extremely well. He was not annoyed but smiled patiently. Before we reach the East Sea, before we come into contact with the netherworld energy, can you use this armor? You should know that these 3 armors are the only 3 left. Now that there was some netherworld chi in the sea, it could be used again. Once it's destroyed, we won't have a second chance. The Grand Supreme Realm is sufficient on land but not here. He paused. But the power of this armor is far more than that. When the time comes, you will understand. 0. Take me with you. Number 1 and number 2 follow behind. The person wrapped in yellow and white armor responded in a low voice. It was a female voice. However, compared to the passionate number 2, 0's voice was colder. The 4 figures submerged into the water, and the huge machine sank to an unknown place. When Li Yunxin and Lu Gongzan returned to Penglai Island, the eastern sky was already slightly bright. However, the brightness was dim as if the sun was covered by a huge black cloth, and could only emit some dim light. The air between the sea and the sky also became sticky. Looking up into the distance, it seemed that a black mist could be seen. There was a dead silence on the sea. However, a few hours ago, there were still many demons on this island. The Purple Knight Immortal was in charge of Penglai, and there were many disciples of the lifeless immortal sect under his command. There were at least tens of thousands of demons left on the island by the Lord of the East Sea. However, these people were turned into ashes in the upheaval last night, without even a scream. Looking down now, the island was as smooth as a mirror, as if it had been like this since ancient times. Li Yunxin landed on the ground, thought of this and sighed, so many people died in one night. Lu Gongzan thought for a moment, more people died on land. I hope this matter will pass, and there will be no more tragedies. When I think about last year, it still feels like a dream. Hearing this, Li Yunxin was stunned. But for some reason he felt slightly comfortable. I was worried that you would be like me. The realm came too fast and there was a problem with the state of mind. Now it seems that you are much better than me. He laughed self-deprecatingly. I was not just lamenting about the number of dead people just now. I mean, these tens of thousands of people were killed by a clone of the 10,000-year-old ancestor. Such a realm and power are beyond my imagination. He paused and looked at Lu Gongzan. You know that I have always been a person who does not admit defeat. But I am not afraid of death. If I can't survive this, you have to live well. Lu Gongzan's face turned serious. Don't say such discouraging words. Li Yunxin smiled again. Let's go. Let's go back and see if Qing Shui has come up with an idea. After saying this, he turned around and walked towards the main hall. But after taking only 3 steps, he suddenly turned around. They didn't know when, but there was an extra figure on the sea. It should be very far away. Penglai Island was very big. Mortals standing on the main peak where the main hall was located could not see the situation on the sea, or even on the neighboring peak. But demons had good eyesight, and they could see straight into the black fog of the sea. Even so, if there was a person of ordinary size on the water, they could not see it. What they could see was only a vast expanse of water. But now, Li Yunxin and Lu Gongzan clearly saw a vague figure on the sea, about the size of a normal person. This meant that the figure was actually very big. So big that they could see it from here. At this time, the person who appeared here was definitely not a good person. Almost at the moment when Li Yunxin turned around, the figure suddenly raised its head and let out a vigorous and mournful roar. It was like some kind of animal, but also like a lunatic who had gone through a long period of torture. Because of this roar, the surrounding black fog suddenly became more viscous, as if many tentacles grew out of that thing's body. 10,000 years old ancestor? So fast. Lu Gongzan's face changed and he said in a low voice. But Li Yunxin shook his head. At this time he should have come. But this one is not. As soon as he finished speaking, the black shadow on the sea soared into the sky. The figure quickly became bigger, and with a bang, it landed on Penglai Island. The whole island trembled because of this. The air was filled with the sound of metal groaning and buzzing. At this time both of them saw how big that thing was. It stood at the edge of the island, but its body almost reached the sky, as if it could pierce through the clouds. This body size was almost the same as the two skeletons Li Yunxin saw at the foot of the cloud mountain. Even though they were separated by half of the island, they still had to raise their heads to barely see its face. Its whole body was dark green and its head was oval. There was no mouth, nose, or ears on its face, only eyes. More than one pair of eyes. Slender, long, and blood-red pupils. From its forehead to its chin, there were 6 neatly arranged pairs of eyes, all of which were violent and angry. But not only its head, there were also 10 pairs of eyes on its torso, all the way to its lower abdomen. The eyes on its head were staring at the direction of Li Yunxin and Lu Gongzan, and the eyes on its torso were rolling. Some of them were looking to the left and some to the right. Some were looking up and some were looking down. Some were rolling back and forth in the eye sockets, sometimes big and sometimes small, as if they were convulsing and twisting. This monster's whole body was emitting a strange and ferocious atmosphere. Just by standing there, it seemed that it had gathered all the hostility in the world, and it wanted to destroy all the creatures in the world. Obviously it was not a creature of the land or the sea, because it was surrounded by a thick aura of the netherworld. Every time its body moved up and down, the aura of the netherworld came and went like a tide. It stared at the direction of the two people for a while, then suddenly lowered its body and got down on all fours like a beast. Li Yunxin immediately activated his supernatural power and set up several prohibitions around him, waiting for the monster to attack. But to his surprise, the monster's target was not him, but the muscles on its arms suddenly bulged, almost bulging into balls. It let out another howl and stabbed its hands into the metal surface of Penglai Island that even Li Yunxin could not destroy. Then it used its strength to tear off a long piece and threw it into the sea. It wants to destroy this island, Lu Gongzan shouted sternly. We can't let it succeed. He was now Long's son who had mastered the mystical realm, and his strength was extremely strong. Therefore, after he shouted, he didn't wait for Li Yunxin to speak and flew toward the monster like lightning. Li Yunxin did not stop him. He said that the monster was not the 10,000-year ancestor because he felt its aura. Although it was violent and angry, its strength was not at the grand supreme level. At most, it was at the peak of the mystic realm. If it was the 10,000-year ancestor, its realm would be much higher. He guessed that the 10,000-year ancestor must have used the same method to refine a helper for him. Now he sent this helper to be the vanguard to test the situation. But even so, this monster must have spent a lot of effort on the 10,000-year ancestor. Killing it first could also greatly weaken the opponent's strength. Compared to the monster, Lu Gongzan's figure was as small as a speck of dust. A speck of dust shot toward the huge monster. It looked like it was no longer hitting a stone with an egg. But until old Lu was within 10 feet of it, there was no strange phenomenon in the air except for the thick aura of the netherworld. This meant that there were no prohibitions around the monster. This situation was the same as what Li Yunxin had expected. Although his current realm was not as high as old Lu's, because he had merged with the divine weapon and had a great saint's life, his body was not much weaker. Even with his cultivation, it was difficult for him to hurt the material of Penglai Island. But the monster tore it apart with its hands. He guessed that the monster should be the type with a strong body but weak power. Now it was confirmed. A loud explosion sounded between the sea and the sky. The monster's huge body suddenly tilted and was almost knocked down. Lu Gongzhan's attack landed on one of the monster's eyes and forced it to take a step back. The power of the attack of the profound realm completely destroyed the eyeball and blew off a small part of its head. Black blood immediately gushed out and shot very high, as if a black javelin had been stabbed into the monster's head. But the black fog around the monster immediately rushed to the wound as if it had a life of its own. In the blink of an eye, the damage on its head was healed. The monster waved its hand as if it was swatting away some annoying fly or mosquito, and pressed down on its arms. It tore off a long piece of metal from the gap and threw it into the sea, causing a huge wave to rise. A figure flew back. Li Yunxin immediately flew into the sky and caught him. Lu Gongzhan's face was pale and vine-like black lines appeared on the side of his face. He breathed twice and the black lines quickly disappeared. Then he said, "That thing is easy to deal with, but the aura of the netherworld, yes." Li Yunxin let go of his hand and stared at the monster in deep thought. He clearly saw what happened just now. Lu Gongzhan attacked the monster, but the monster did not pay attention to him, and only wanted to destroy the island. In the end, half of its head was blown away by the profound realm Long Sun's attack. If Lu Gongzhan attacked it a dozen more times, this thing would probably fall apart. But the problem lies in the aura of the netherworld that lingers around it. It's like a person rushing into a poisonous gas to hit someone. Of course he can hold his hand. If he doesn't use his full strength, he can hold his breath for a very long time. But if he uses his full strength, he'll probably need to breathe again very soon. Lu Gongzhan used his full strength in that attack, so he'll need to adjust his breathing very soon. The profound realm Long Sun's so-called adjustment is only a split second without any pause. But even so, the aura of the netherworld has already entered his body. But if he doesn't use his full strength, he'll only be able to tickle that thing, unable to cause any real damage. He can also use treasures to attack it. But a demon's body is much stronger than a cultivator's, and their body is their strongest weapon. Li Yunxin and Lu Gongzhan's saint's treasures can be used against normal demons and cultivators, but against this monster protected by the aura of the netherworld, it's a bit difficult. Moreover, once the treasures enter the netherworld, the flow of spiritual energy will be blocked, so it's hard to say if they can still be used. As this thought flashed through his mind, another 4 figures flew over. The one in front was Daoist Qingshui, the 2 witches and Zai Daoist followed closely behind. Qingshui's face has a serious expression. She stopped next to Li Yunxin. "Where did this thing come from?" Li Yunxin asked curiously. "You've been staying on the Dragon Island, the situation around here is completely under your control, didn't you notice it before?" "That's the strange part," Daoist Qingshui said in a low voice. "There were no signs at all, as if it suddenly appeared from the bottom of the sea." "That's really strange," Li Yunxin said indifferently. "The most important thing now is to eliminate it." Daoist Qingshui said solemnly, "We don't know what kind of existence the 10,000-year-old ancestor will be after practicing demonic arts. Now that this thing has come to us, it's our chance. Maybe we can find some clues from it. Among us, Li Xinyu's cultivation is the highest. But she lowered her voice, is the same as Bai Yunxin. Her personality is hard to understand. Once we get into a killing frenzy, we'll tear that monster into pieces, then we'll have fought for nothing. We still need you to do this. You killed the Qilin and Zither monarch on the Dragon Island, you should know the weakness of this kind of monster. You should know when to stop and when to stop. I'll also use the Dragon Island to mobilize the surrounding spiritual energy to help you." Chapter 769. Li Yunxin thought for a while and said, "Okay." Priest Qingshui was stunned for a moment when he agreed so readily. Li Yunxin seemed to know what she was thinking. She smiled and said, "You don't think that I will still hide and play with the lives of my friends at this time, do you? I'm going. Help me." After he said this, he flew towards the direction of the monster. The 2 demonesses and Lu Gongzhan exclaimed. Just as they were about to stop her, the Taoist of Clearwater stepped in front of them and said, "He knows what he's doing. Don't go, don't ruin his plan." At this time a figure jumped out from the sky. It was the 9th young master. He came late and could only see the black gas from afar. When he saw Li Yunxin rushing towards the black gas, he shouted, "Li Yunxin, I'm coming to help you." But as soon as he said this, Li Yunxin's figure flashed past him. He stretched out his hand and sent him flying. "Go back. Don't cause trouble." This attack was powerful, but it didn't hurt him. The 9th young master didn't even have a chance to resist. He was shot towards them like an arrow and was caught by Lu Gongzhan. He was not convinced and wanted to shout again. But when he opened his mouth, his blood rushed to his throat and he swallowed his words. Brother Xian has his own plan. Lu Gongzan frowned. He looked at priest Qing Shui, then looked at the two demonesses and the ninth young master. Do as he says. Based on the two demonesses' character, one sentence from Li Yunxin wouldn't be able to persuade them. But when they heard Lu Gongzan's words they hesitated. Old Lu and Li Yunxin were sworn brothers. Even he had said something like that. Perhaps Li Yunxin did have her own plan. After saying this, Lu Gongzan glanced at Taoish Qing Shui. The two banshees saw the look in his eyes and understood what he meant. They should stay here and keep an eye on the Clearwater man, to prevent this person from causing any trouble. Hence, he ignored the shouts of the ninth young master and calmed down. The people of Clearwater were very satisfied with their attitude. He retreated to the side and stood in the air beside the Purple Knight Reverend. Although these people wanted to deal with the 10,000-year ancestor together, they still couldn't completely trust each other. Even in the face of this powerful enemy, they were still divided into two factions. But even so, this situation was much better than pretending to be united but actually divided. Li Yunxin's speed was extremely fast. In the time it took for them to exchange these two sentences, he had already struck the monster's left forearm. Compared to the monster, he was like a grain of rice stuck to his arm. But this grain of rice's destructive power was shocking. With a loud bang, the netherworld aura in front of the monster was blown away by the terrible impact, revealing a large piece of clear space. The monster's forearm was broken, and its huge body suddenly sank to the left, almost falling down. But it didn't seem to care about such an injury. Its right hand didn't stop. It raised it and threw another piece of metal into the water. Then it moved a few steps to steady itself and waved its left hand. As it waved its left arm in the air, the netherworld aura rushed into the wound. When the left arm was put down, it was as good as new. This attack didn't succeed. Li Yunxin's figure immediately disappeared into the black fog, and couldn't be seen clearly. He seemed to be looking for the monster's weakness. Taoish Qing Shui saw this attack and whispered to the Purple Knight Reverend beside him. If he really wanted to fight, he should have released the demon monkey in the first move. The Purple Knight Reverend looked at Lu Gongzan and the others not far away. Master, do you know what he wants to do? Taoish Qing Shui smiled slightly. He talked with Lu Gongzan in the sky before. Although they set up a lot of restrictions, they definitely didn't expect the Dragon Island's power to be far beyond their imagination. I heard everything they said. Li Yunxin planned to use the method of the 10,000-year ancestor and the Qilin dragon to refine the netherworld himself. Then he would go and deal with the 10,000-year ancestor. The Purple Knight Reverend was stunned. After a while he said, "Why did he do this? Let's not talk about whether he could win using the 10,000-year ancestor's method. If he couldn't open the door to the Dragon Island and fill the ground with netherworld aura, he wouldn't be able to stay on the ground. He would either be trapped on the Dragon Island or go to the netherworld. Why would he do such a thing?" He told Lu Gongzan that it was to protect his friends. Taoish Qing Shui stared at the monster in the distance. I think it's a bit far-fetched to use such a noble reason on Li Yunxin. But on the other hand, he's always wanted to find him. Refining himself into the netherworld is indeed a good way to go there. He's used to showing off and showing off. He can also gain some gratitude from Lu Gongzan and Li Xinyu. That sounds like his style. So, Li Yunxin really can't do anything now. The Purple Knight Reverend thought about it. Master, don't worry. I hope so. But, the Purple Knight Reverend paused. Li Yunxin still has his good points. Taoish Qing Shui smiled and looked at the Purple Knight Reverend. Good points? Tell me, what are they? Compared to many demons and cultivators, he's a loyal person. Now that he has a powerful force, he doesn't show any intention to fight for hegemony or bring chaos to the world. The Purple Knight Reverend sighed. To be honest, there are so many heroes in the world, but there are too few like him. He's one of the rare people who's kept his heart. Someone like him. Even if we can't use him, if we don't have to be enemies, we should let him live. Taoish Qing Shui turned to look at him. I used to have the same thoughts as you. But after interacting with him more, you'll know that Li Yunxin is a dog that can't be tamed. When these words came out of her mouth, her expression was very calm. The Purple Knight Reverend was shocked. Master, you think my evaluation of him is too harsh? Taoish Qing Shui smiled. But it's the truth. He's different from those demons and cultivators. If a person isn't a threat to what he wants to do, he won't provoke them. But at the same time, if he felt threatened by someone, it would be absolutely difficult for him to trust that person. To change his mind, the difficulty is no less than entering the Taishang realm. The Purple Knight Reverend frowned and glanced at a few people not far away. But those few people were not trustworthy to Li Yunxin in the past. But now they. Taoish Qingshui turned around with a smile and looked at the two female demons, the ninth young master and Lu Gongzan. How many times did Long Jiu live and die in the hands of Li Yunxin? How many times did he get to stand by his side? His life is in the hands of Li Yunxin. But even so, Li Yunxin always sends him away when he's in trouble. Is this called trust? Li Xinyu. How many times did he die in the hands of Li Yunxin? But because of his obsession he risked his life for him. But look at them fighting side by side, they are very close. But will Li Yunxin tell her his secret? It's only because she's useful that he reluctantly accepted her. In the words of mortals, Li Xinyu is just a useful general to him. Her body has fused with the dragon soul. Her consciousness will be slowly devoured by the dragon soul. If she wants to keep her consciousness she has to give up the dragon soul. But then Li Xinyu will die. Li Yunxin couldn't be any more familiar with this sort of possession and fusion. Didn't he think of this? But when did he mention it to the female demon? Because if he did... Taoish Qingshui sneered. If the female demon continues to keep the dragon soul to help him, he will bear the burden of being ungrateful. If the female demon gives up the dragon soul, he will lose a great help. With his cultivation, it's not a difficult thing to reconstruct the body of the female demon with some effort. But has he mentioned it before? Because he feels that he has to preserve his strength and protect himself in this dangerous situation. The Purple Knight Reverend frowned. This, Taoish Qingshui continued, let's talk about that by Yunxin. Now you can see Li Yunxin's attitude towards her. She's just a passerby. But she saved his life and later helped him several times. Li Xinyu and Bai Yunxin made a ruckus here. Do you know why they're back together now? At this moment the Purple Knight Reverend had nothing to say. He could only frown. I thought they planned to, because Li Xinyu also knows that he's going to die. Taoish Qingshui said coldly. I can hear what they say in the sky. Li Xinyu told Bai Yunxin that he doesn't have long to live. When the fish demon is gone, Li Yunxin will naturally belong to the crane demon. Even Bai Yunxin frowned and asked Li Xinyu if there's any way to save her life. The Purple Knight Reverend was slightly moved. This Li Xinyu is really the most infatuated person in the world. So now you should know what kind of person Li Yunxin is. Taoish Qingshui sighed and said, he's not like those demons and cultivators who harm people, but that's also the scariest thing about him. That's because he has a firm goal, he doesn't have the energy or time to spend on other things. Those people in the netherworld, led by Chen Zhao, don't care about the lives of the people on the ground. They're just like Li Yunxin because they're restraining the Freemasons. The only reason we can get their help is because they need us. Li Yunxin is in cahoots with them. If we want to live, if we want the world not to be destroyed by them, there are only two ways. One was to kill them all, and the other was to seal them in the netherworld, forcing them to fight to the death with the true devil. If there's no Li Yunxin, we're already on the right track with the second option. But now that he's appeared, he wants to go to the Dragon Island and the netherworld. It's very likely that our plan will fail. We can't help the people in the netherworld anymore, and we can't allow the entrance to be opened. Taoish Qingshui took a deep breath. So he must die. This has nothing to do with personal grievances. You have to be clear about this, you can't have any sympathy for him. The Purple Knight Reverend was silent for a while and said, Master, are you going to kill him now? No. Taoish Qingshui looked into the black fog. He hasn't used all his abilities yet. Once we act rashly there won't be a second chance. And, now we have to deal with the 10,000-year-old ancestor. The 10,000-year-old ancestor is even more dangerous. At this point, Li Yunxin had already hit the monster 3 times in the black fog. Although he was in the mysterious realm of Shi because of his special physique, the strength of his attacks wasn't weaker than Lu Gongzan's. And because he had been cultivating for a long time, he was much more agile than Lu Gongzan. The monster didn't care about the first attack, but after the second and third attack, it became annoyed. But it also used one hand to destroy the island, and the other to brush off Li Yunxin. Of course it couldn't hit. Li Yunxin had stayed in the netherworld aura for so long, there should be a danger of the aura entering his body. But both Lu Gongzan and Taoish Qingshui knew that Li Yunxin wanted the aura of the netherworld. He originally planned to refine the aura of the netherworld into his body, and now such a monster came to his door. But drawing the aura of the netherworld into his body was like drawing the power of wish into his body in the city of Wei. This process was not only painful but it would also weaken one's strength. The method of the 10,000-year-old ancestor was to refine slowly in places where the aura of the netherworld was thin. But now Li Yunxin didn't have such conditions. Moreover, when he was refining himself, he had to split his attention to attack the monster and dodge its counterattack. Therefore, after the first 3 attacks, he was in danger and was almost scratched by the monster's palm. At this moment, Li Yunxin shouted, "Qing Shui, help me!" His shout seemed to have an echo. Li Xinyu, Bai Yunxin, and the 9th young master had been watching anxiously. If it wasn't for Lu Gongzan who frowned and stopped them, they would have joined the battle. Now that they heard Li Yunxin's words, they shouted at Taoist Qing Shui together, "He asked you to help." Taoist Qing Shui smiled. After waiting for 3 to 4 breaths, he said, "Li Yunxin, what do you want me to do? Why the F***ck are you asking me?" Maybe it was because he couldn't fight for a long time, or maybe it was because of the extreme pain of refining the aura of the netherworld into his body. Li Yunxin was in a bad mood. "The Dragon Island is in your hands. But the power of the 3 islands of Penglai can't be used anymore." Taoist Qing Shui said as she slowly drew something in the air, "If you really want me to help, I can only help you to gather the aura of heaven and earth." After she said this, the air in front of her twisted and a guqin condensed out of thin air. This guqin was the one that Red Madam saw when she fought with her for the first time. "Now you are surrounded by the aura of the netherworld. I will guide the aura over and let you breathe." After saying this, she lightly plucked the strings of the guqin. The aura of the netherworld around the monster was originally hazy and had no boundary with the aura of heaven and earth. But when the guqin in front of Taoist Qing Shui made a sound, everyone felt that the monster's body suddenly became smaller. But it wasn't because the body became smaller, it was more like they were getting further away from the monster in an instant. The space between the sea and the sky also lit up. The aura of the netherworld around the monster seemed to be put into an invisible box. It had a clear boundary with the aura of heaven and earth, and not a trace of it leaked out. Chapter 770. This trick was used to deal with Red Lady. She couldn't move forward in front of Taoist Qing Shui. No matter how fast she moved forward, she couldn't take half a step forward. In terms of cultivation, Red Lady was stronger than this monster at that time. It took her a lot of effort to break through the shackles. Now it was used on it. When the monster stretched out its hand to tear Penglai Island, it found that it couldn't touch anything. When it was attacked by Lu Gongzan and Li Yunxin, it wasn't very angry. But now that it couldn't touch Penglai Island, it immediately raised its head and let out a terrifying roar. It was like a child whose favorite toy was suddenly taken away. It was furious. Therefore, it immediately straightened its body and lowered its head. The dozens of eyes on its head and torso flashed. It seemed to be looking for where Li Yunxin was and wanted to tear him into pieces. The netherworld aura around the monster was originally a little thin. But now that it was isolated from the sea and sky by Taoist Qing Shui, it immediately became thick. In a space, the rolling black fog was like a thick cloud. Everyone could only see the monster's exposed limbs. They couldn't see anything that was hidden in the black fog. It seemed that because of this, its movements became more agile and no longer looked slow like before. With such a huge body, when it waved its arms, it was so fast that it almost left afterimages. It could be seen how terrifying its speed was. Seeing this, Li Xinyu shouted, "Are you helping him or harming him?" Taoist Qing Shui ignored her. He raised his hand and plucked on the zither again. He said in a deep voice, "Li Yunxin, I'll lend you this sea and sky." As soon as he finished his words, the space changed again. It was very similar to the coffee that Li Yunxin drank in his previous life. White milk was poured into the dark brown coffee. In the thick netherworld chi, a glimmering spiritual power immediately appeared. The spiritual power swirled and diluted the black fog. Soon the two forces in the space became clear. Li Yunxin's figure also reappeared. The spiritual power was shining, which was a sign that it was extremely thick. The vast land of the 9 seas and even the midland was the foundation of Taoist Qing Shui's incarnation. At this moment, she had used all her strength to transfer the spiritual energy in the vast region and poured it into that space. No one knew how Li Yunxin felt inside. But outside, everyone could feel the sudden emptiness around them. It was as if the air around a mortal had been sucked clean in an instant, leaving nothing behind. When the cultivators on the ground were immersed in the netherworld energy, their movements would be hindered, and their chi would be impeded. Based on this deduction, monsters with netherworld energy in their bodies should have the same feeling in an environment with dense spiritual power. At this moment, the spiritual energy in that space had been destroyed to the extreme, and it was on par with the netherworld chi. With the support of this spiritual power, Li Yunxin was like a tiger that had grown wings. His body also glowed with a brilliant golden light. For a moment he was evenly matched with the monster and even had the upper hand. When the Purple Knight Enlightened saw this, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Master, you." He was also a profound realm cultivator, and his understanding of cultivation was among the best in the world. Therefore he knew what was happening in front of him. When cultivators were cultivating, they all liked to look for places that were rich in natural powers. Those grotto heavens and blessed lands were places with extremely dense spiritual qi. For example, the Cloud Mountain was rich in natural powers, and people who cultivated there would be like tigers that had grown wings. It was thanks to Yun Shan that a genius like Lu Ling could become famous in the past. However, no matter how rich the natural powers were on the ground, there was a limit. However, at the moment, the amount of natural power contained in the space where Li Yunxin was at had already gone beyond that limit. Priest Qing Shui's move was so shocking that nearly 1/8 of the entire Midland's natural power had been put into that space. Such a great amount of natural powers, if used by one person, how powerful would he be? It would allow Li Yunxin's body to be filled to the brim, and his realm to be perfect. As long as his body could withstand it, he would be able to break through to a higher realm in the blink of an eye. There was no need for nourishment or consolidation. His foundation was already so solid that it couldn't be any stronger. What was there to be afraid of? It was not impossible for him to break into the peak level of the profound realm, or even the highest realm. However, Li Yunxin's physical body was indeed incomparably strong, and it could be said to be the best in the world. He could really do that. The Purple Knight Immortal was not the only one who felt incredibly horrified when he saw this scene. Even the two demonesses, Lu Gongzan and Ninth Young Master, were horrified. Priest Qing Shui had been saying that she wanted to cooperate with Li Yunxin sincerely, but everyone was doubtful. But now she suddenly used such a method. How could a person with ulterior motives do this kind of method of giving all the support she had? The Purple Knight Master exclaimed, then lowered his voice, "Master, you said you want to kill him." But now Priest Qing Shui's face was expressionless, as if she was under great pressure. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke, like a breeze blowing out from a crack. "That's what I want. Now, if Li Yunxin wants to refine the netherworld, he will definitely die. He is not as strong as the 10,000-year ancestor and the Qilin dragon. If he forcibly draws the spiritual energy into his body, I'm afraid he will die before he can refine it. Why don't I give him a push here and let him reach the peak level of the profound realm first, then we will take this risk. In the future we will also have a chance to defeat the 10,000-year ancestor." The Purple Knight Master frowned and thought for a while, then said, "But, if he really becomes stronger, no one can restrain him." Priest Qing Shui smiled, "You don't know him. He is a person who is not ashamed to run away when there is a great disparity in strength. But when he still has a chance, he is bolder than anyone else. If I don't give him a push, he might really run away with his people when he sees that the situation is not good. It will be more dangerous for us to deal with the 10,000-year ancestor. But now that he has reached the peak level of the profound realm, or even the grand high, according to my understanding of him, it will arouse his competitive spirit, and he will fight the 10,000-year ancestor to death. Moreover, if he succeeds in refining the netherworld and defeats the 10,000-year ancestor, it will be easier for us to deal with him. Look at that monster and you will know." The Purple Knight Master's eyes were fixed on Li Yunxin and the monster. Now that he heard Priest Qing Shui's words, he saw some clues. In that space, there was a clear distinction between black and white qi, and the spiritual power was even more turbulent than the netherworld qi. The black mist was gradually forced to the monster, and the spiritual power gradually surrounded Li Yunxin. While fighting the monster, Li Yunxin madly inhaled and exhaled spiritual power, and his whole body was almost transparent. Priest Qing Shui was right. Li Yunxin was indeed using this extremely rare opportunity to push his realm to the peak level of the profound realm, or even the grand high. In this way, with a stronger foundation, he would be able to refine himself. Chapter 771. The monster's movements were being hindered. As soon as the shining spiritual power touched the monster's body, it was as if it was entangled by thick seaweed. Its movement became slow and it quickly retreated into the black fog. If Li Yunxin becomes a monster like this, we can use the same method to deal with him. Daoist Qing Shui said softly, "He is a human being. When he is on the ground he can use many tricks. But if he becomes a netherworld he will only get weaker and weaker. The sea and sky are not good for him. He won't be able to stay here for long." Zai Jinren was silent. Daoist Qingshui's words reminded him of a rumor about a monster called a blood-sucking monster in the West region. It was said that the blood-sucking monster was originally a human being. By chance it became a monster. Once the monster was formed, it would feed on human blood. It would be extremely strong and as fast as the wind. It was difficult to be killed by weapons. Compared to when it was a human being, it was much more dangerous. But the blood-sucking monster had a weakness. It was afraid of sunlight. To him, mortals who did not have the strength to truss a chicken could move around in the daytime, but he himself would be burned by the sunlight. If he stayed for too long he would turn into ashes. What Daoist Qingshui said was similar to the blood-sucking monster's theory. If Li Yunxin successfully refined the netherworld he would be stronger. But at that time he wouldn't be able to use the spiritual power between heaven and earth, so it would be easier to deal with him. But he still felt that something was wrong. Li Yunxin was a scheming person. His words couldn't be easily trusted. And the master beside him, although he didn't want to admit it, was very similar to Li Yunxin. Zai Zhenren suspected that what she said to him might not be her real thoughts. He looked at Daoist Qingshui again and found that she was no longer talking. Her body was motionless, and her sleeves were hanging down as if she was isolated from the world. But her eyes were shining. She stared at the space as if she had put all her attention into it. Looking at the monster, the extremely rich spiritual power seemed to be alive. It didn't look like Li Yunxin was fighting alone. It was more like the spiritual power itself had a consciousness and was fighting with him. Within the rolling black fog, the monster seemed to be gradually weakening. Originally, when the monster was injured, the black mist would quickly heal it. But now that Taoist Clearwater had poured all his spiritual power into the wound, once Li Yunxin hit it, the spiritual power would surge into the wound and forcefully push the chi of the netherworld away. While Li Yunxin's body was being corroded by the netherworld energy, the monster's body was also being corroded by the spiritual energy. However, the monster's intelligence was far lower than Li Yunxin's, so how could it be a match for him? After another quarter of an hour, the monster finally lost an arm and half of its head. Half of the eyes on the torso were blinded, and black blood spurted out endlessly. However, the more Li Yunxin fought, the more valiant he became. The two horns on his head shone brilliantly, enveloping half of his body in brilliance. That space was isolated from the real world. No one could sense his aura, so they didn't know what realm he was at. But just by looking at him, they could tell that his current speed was more than 100 times faster than when he was fighting the enemy. At first, they could still see his afterimage when he attacked with all his might, but now not even the afterimage could be seen. They could only see the sudden explosion of black gas and turbulence of spiritual energy when their limbs collided. Every time they collided, the invisible space would slightly tremble, as if it could not withstand such a terrible force and would collapse in the next moment. However, such power was under the condition that he refined the chi of the netherworld into his body at the same time. Now, his body was so bright that it was almost transparent. Therefore, when he occasionally appeared, one could see the faint black gas in the meridians of the ocean of chi. The Taoist master Zai was also shocked by his advancement. This was an opportunity that many cultivators dreamed of. Therefore, he subconsciously looked at Taoist Clearwater who was beside him. It was fine if he didn't look, but when he looked, he almost screamed. Just a quarter of an hour ago, Taoist Clearwater was still beautiful. But now, she seemed to have aged a few decades in an instant. Her skin was no longer full and smooth. It became rough, loose, and even faintly spotted. Her figure was no longer straight. Instead, it was slightly hunched, as if she had reached the end of her life, and her fragile bones could no longer bear the weight of life. The Taoist master Zai was stunned. After being stunned for 2 breaths, he said, "My lord." Taoist Clearwater did not say anything. At this moment, the Taoist master Zai realized one thing: she was the incarnation of this world. And the essence of this world was the spiritual power. It was not wrong to say that she was the incarnation of the spiritual power. But now, she used her supernatural power to put all the spiritual power into that space. Some of it was used for Li Yunxin to fill his body and break through the realm, and the rest of it was used to invade the monster's body, making it unable to heal itself. Wasn't it equivalent to giving her own body to Li Yunxin and the monster? The spiritual power between heaven and earth was related to her life. Her appearance became like this, which meant that the spiritual power in that space was gradually consumed and weakened. She was using her own life to help Li Yunxin and fight with the monster. What was she going to do? When he looked at Taoist Clearwater again, he found that not only was she haggard, but her expression also became dull, as if she was gradually losing her mind. The Taoist Master Zai was anxious. But he also knew that he could not disturb Taoist Clearwater at this time. The only thing he could do was to protect her. Once the two female monsters or the ninth young master or Lu Gongzan had evil intentions. Now was the most vulnerable time for his lord. With this thought in mind, he looked in the direction of those people, and met Li Xinyu's gaze. This female monster had merged with the dragon soul, and her cultivation level was extremely high. The Taoist Master Zai could sense the abnormality of Taoist Clearwater, so how could Red Lady, who had been on guard against her, not notice it? When the two of them met, the Taoist Master Zai was shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. He felt that his head was about to explode. When cultivators and demons met, they rarely sensed each other's breath. Because this was a very offensive and rude action. But now this Red Lady did not even try to avoid it. Her extremely aggressive and powerful breath pierced the surroundings of the Taoist Master Zai and Taoist Clearwater, as if she wanted to know their current situation clearly. In the current situation, it could be regarded as some kind of extremely dangerous signal. She really had evil intentions. The Taoist Master Zai immediately widened his eyes in anger. He used his spiritual power to force Red Lady's breath away, and shouted in a deep voice, "What are you going to do?" Red Lady sneered and casually turned her face away. She whispered something to Bai Yunxin, Lu Gongzan, and the ninth young master. Then, the gazes of the four people turned to look at him once more. The Taoist Master Zai read a more dangerous message from their faces. He made up his mind, stepped in the void, and blocked in front of Taoist Clearwater. Everyone think carefully. The outcome of the battle has not been decided, and there is a 10,000-year-old ancestor behind us. If you make a sneak attack at this time, be careful that Li Yunxin will die. Chapter 772. But as soon as he finished speaking, there was a sudden roar in the distance. When Li Yunxin and the monster were fighting, they were confined to a space as if they were isolated from the world. Even though the space was filled with danger and was extremely fierce, it was difficult for the sound to come out. It was more like thunder exploding in the distance, and only a hoarse voice could be heard leisurely. But now, it was as if the door of a noisy room had suddenly been opened, and a deafening explosion suddenly surged out. Taoist Purple Knight was startled and looked in that direction. He saw that Li Yunxin had already rushed high into the sky, his body shining with golden light, as if he was a descending god. The monster's body was badly mutilated, and its entire head had been blown away. Many of its eyes were black and bloody, and blood flowed like a waterfall. Its lower limbs were also broken, and many slender granules stretched out from the wounds like tentacles, desperately trying to regenerate new limbs. However, the shining golden spiritual energy dispersed the netherworld aura, tightly wrapped around its wounds and invaded its body. The monster was temporarily unable to regenerate, and its huge body was slowly collapsing. But it looked slow, only because it was seen from afar. In fact, whether it was Taoist Purple Knight or Lu Gongzan, they all felt the strong wind. When the monster's incomparably huge body collapsed, the wind pressure produced by it had already reached them. It seemed that, as long as Li Yunxin launched another thunderous attack, victory would be decided. Taoist Purple Knight knew what this meant. At the moment when Li Yunxin's shining figure suddenly pounced down, he raised his hand and set up several restrictions in front of him. Then he refined more than 10 divine weapons from the void, and attacked Red Lady like a storm. An even more terrifying roar came. Li Yunxin's figure collided with the monster. Suddenly, a layer of colorful light shield appeared above the monster's body. That light shield seemed to be composed of many hexagons, and it didn't look like it was condensed with netherworld power, nor did it look like it was condensed with spiritual energy. However, it actually blocked Li Yunxin's attack. At the point where the two enormous forces collided, Li Yunxin's body was covered in dazzling golden scales. The bone spurs on his hands looked sinister, and his fingertips were as sharp as knives. The stalemate lasted for a moment. As if he was tearing something tangible, he slowly tore open a gap in the light escape. Then, like a hot knife through butter, it pierced right through the monster's body. The two halves of the monster swayed for a moment and finally fell into the ocean on both sides. Black waves surged towards Penglai Island. At the same time, Red Madam finally said, "It seems you don't need to worry about his life." As soon as he finished his sentence, he went straight for Taoist Qing Shui, who was behind the Purple Knight Spiritual Master, against the divine weapons that were shot out by the Purple Knight Spiritual Master. Red Lady's cultivation was the highest among these people. However, he still didn't dare to use his physical body to take on the Purple Knight Taoist's divine weapon. However, with a wave of her sleeve, 7 or 8 swords were sent flying, opening a path for herself. But the reason why a heavenly weapon was a heavenly weapon was that it was one with the master's spirituality, and when it was used, it was no different from one's own arm. The rest of the swords immediately turned around and attacked Red Lady's back like a poisonous snake. She had no choice but to turn around and fight. But she wasn't the only one who came to attack. On the other side, Lu Gongzan, Bai Yunxin, and the 9th young master had split into 2 groups to attack. The Purple Knight Enlightened's cultivation was profound, and it would be difficult to defeat any one of them in a one-on-one fight. But now he was facing a formidable lineup. Except for the 9th young master, all of them could be considered as the top figures in the world. As a result, in that moment of distraction, Bai Yunxin managed to sneak up behind him and he took a solid hit from her. The body of a demon was stronger than that of a cultivator, and its body was a heavenly weapon. This palm was merciless. The Purple Knight Enlightened was immediately hit and flew more than 10 feet away. If their target wasn't Taoist Qing Shui but him, he would probably die on the spot within 3 breaths. But Bai Yunxin, Lu Gongzan, and the 9th young master only wanted to capture Taoist Qing Shui, and so did Red Lady. The Purple Knight Enlightened was pushed to Red Lady's side. Red Lady didn't even look at him and turned around to attack again. He had already caught his breath, and hurriedly used his spiritual power to block this attack. But in the end he was still no match for the peak of the profound realm, and was once again hit more than 10 feet away. He could only watch helplessly. 4 people surrounded Taoist Qing Shui, and without any hesitation they waved their palms and attacked. The Purple Knight Enlightened spat out blood and let out a shrill scream, "How dare you!" At this moment, Taoist Qing Shui suddenly opened her eyes. The spiritual power between heaven and earth seemed to have gathered around her at this moment. It was as if a blazing sun had rushed out of her body, and with a loud bang, the 4 people were actually pushed back. Li Yunxin's voice was also heard, "Stop." Some kind of invisible power? It wasn't majestic or domineering, but it was indeed hard for people to have the will to resist, spread across the sea and the sky. There was a familiar aura in this power but also a strange sense of danger. It belonged to Li Yunxin. At this moment he had already returned to his human form. His appearance and clothes were almost the same as before. But there were still some differences. Maybe it was because his aura had become extremely strong. That strength was mixed with something deep and ruthless. Or maybe it was because of his eyes. They used to be golden, but now they had become deep black, like a bottomless whirlpool. Every detail of his body, the tip of his hair, the corner of his clothes, and even the movement of his hands, was mixed with something indescribable. Because of this aura the 4 people really stopped. The Purple Knight Enlightened, who had been hit more than 10 feet away, flew back to the front of Taoist Qing Shui, endured his injuries and set up a sword formation again and said with a trembling voice, "My lord." Taoist Qing Shui didn't say anything and closed her eyes again. The spiritual power between the sea and the sky surged into her body, and her old and haggard face slowly became beautiful again. But now no one cared about her. Li Yunxin's figure flashed in the distance, and in the next moment he appeared in front of everyone. Lu Gongzan's eyes widened and after a long time he said, "Brother Xen, you are already the Grand Supreme?" Li Yunxin smiled, "I'm not sure." Everyone was stunned. He spread his hands, "I've never seen the real Grand Supreme. I really don't know. Since you don't know, it can't be." Lu Gongzan thought about it and seemed to understand what he meant. He couldn't be more familiar with a person's level of cultivation. Even if no one taught him what a state of mind, what a transcendent state, and what a true state was, he should be able to feel that there were some extraordinary changes in his body. For example, his state of mind, his perception, his insight, and the use of supernatural powers and rules. Every time he entered a new state, it was like opening a new window, and he would always know that he saw something he had never seen before. Chapter 773. But since Li Yunxin said he didn't know, it should mean that he didn't get something new and different that could make him realize that he was different from the previous realm. The Grand Supreme Realm was extraordinary, and it must be very different from the Profound Realm. At that point he should not know. But Red Lady looked at him. "But, your aura doesn't seem to be at the peak of the Profound Realm." She felt that she was very close to Li Yunxin, so she didn't hesitate to check his aura again. She realized that he was different from her. Ordinary cultivators could compare the spiritual energy and supernatural powers in their bodies to water. For example, the intent realm was a trickling stream while the void realm was a gurgling stream. At the transcendent realm, the spiritual energy was quite strong like a small river. This small river flowed down and merged into more tributaries, which was the true realm like a surging river. The profound realm was the profound realm. When the profound realm advanced to the next level, the waters of the great river would rumble and roar, and would flow for thousands of kilometers. This big river would eventually flow into a vast lake. That lake was wide and deep, which was the peak of the profound realm. At this point, the spiritual energy became more and more vigorous, and the big lake became deeper and deeper, until the bottomless realm. Maybe he would open up another unimaginable world and enter the grand supreme realm. Red Lady's current cultivation level and Zither Jun's previous cultivation level were like the bottomless lake. But the current Li Yunxin was very different. Although the lake was big, it had a boundary. But Li Yunxin's aura was like a vast ocean. This ocean was also bottomless but also boundless. As for the aura in the ocean, it made people uncontrollably afraid. They were afraid that if they accidentally fell into the water, they would sink in the ocean forever and be suppressed by the boundless darkness, never to be reincarnated. Li Yunxin smiled and restrained his aura. Maybe it's because of the influence of the netherworld aura. As he said this, he changed the topic and looked at the water immortal who was asking Lu Gongzan, "Everything was fine, why did you start fighting?" Lu Gongzan was stunned for a while. Others didn't know, but he thought of a possibility. Li Yunxin's aura seemed to have the smell of the netherworld. He really refined the netherworld aura. Now that there were netherworld and spiritual energy coexisting in his body, he should be extremely weak and in extreme pain. But he still had this kind of aura and realm. If he didn't refine the netherworld, he might really be the grand supreme realm. His current situation should be caused by the netherworld aura in his body, leading him onto a fork in the road of unknown fortune and misfortune. When he thought of this, his heart ached even more than if he had lost the opportunity to advance to the grand supreme realm. He was speechless for a long time. After a long while, he finally answered, "Brother Xen, I have no choice but to do this. If we guessed wrong, the person might not be trusted, and the consequences would be unimaginable." The person who was said to be Hat, Jun, was the Jun said. He swallowed the words that Li Yunxin did not want others to know. "You already have a way to deal with the 10,000-year ancestor. If you didn't take the opportunity to kill him, in the future." Li Yunxin sighed with a smile. "Lu, you are the kindest among us." "I know what you mean. But now." He looked at Daoist Qingshui. "I also thought she might hurt me. But just now, she gave me all the spiritual energy in the sea and sky realm. That's why I have the current realm. At least at this stage I believe her. If I do anything to her now, I won't be able to forgive myself." He then looked at Ninth Young Master and Li Xianyu, who still had indignant expressions on their faces. He spread his hands and said, "But after we kill the 10,000-year ancestor, if you still don't like her, then we can talk about the next step." After saying this, he nodded slightly to the Purple Knight Daoist. "I was impulsive and caused you some trouble. Don't take it to heart." The Purple Knight Daoist had just calmed his surging qi and blood. But after hearing his words, he almost vomited a mouthful of blood again. Bai Yunxin, who was in the profound realm, and Red Lady, who was at the peak of the profound realm, both gave him a slap. The fact that he was able to keep his life was already a great fortune, and he had indeed sustained serious injuries. In the end, Li Yunxin only said a few words in return. But Daoist Qingshui let out a long breath, and the dense spiritual energy around her slowly dissipated. Along with her aura, the spiritual energy in the sea and sky realm also became abundant. "I didn't expect that Li Yunxin would say that," Daoist Qingshui said softly. "Fine. Since you said that, I will let it go." After saying so, he looked at Red Madam and Bai Yunxin. "Little Demoness, you must remember this. No matter what a man says in his heart, he hopes that his woman is kind. Otherwise, how can he sleep in peace when he comes home with a cruel little lover when he's out there?" Red Lady raised her eyebrows. "Pa." Daoist Qingshui didn't mind. She looked at Li Yunxin again. "Just now, I used my spiritual energy to help you, but it was swallowed by the monster again. It's hard to fight now. If I stay here, I will be a burden when the 10,000-year ancestor comes. Why don't I go back to the Dragon Island? You are at the peak of the profound realm now, and with the help of a Grand Elder, you should be able to fight back. What do you think?" Bai Yunxin said quietly behind Li Yunxin. "She is afraid. She needs to hide." But Li Yunxin smiled. "Okay. You go to the Dragon Island and I will fight the enemy outside." But the 10,000-year ancestor will be in pain for a long time without such a vanguard. I don't think he will come so soon. Daoist Qingshui also smiled. I hope so. Purple Knight, let's go. After saying this, she immediately went into the main hall of Peng Lai with the Purple Knight Daoist. The ninth young master opened his eyes wide. Li Yunxin, you are silly. Even if she didn't want to harm us before, she won't believe us after what happened just now. Look at them when they left. They are obviously afraid that we will attack them again. If you ask her to go back, there will be endless trouble. Lu Gongzan also frowned. We didn't think it through before. But now, Brother Xan, even if you don't attack her, you can't ask her to go back to the Dragon Island. But Li Yunxin didn't say anything. He turned around in the air and faced the direction where the monster came from. He squinted his eyes and stared at the sea. After a while he said in a deep voice, you guys go back too. Go to Peng Lai Palace. The ninth young master was happy. Catch clear water? Li Yunxin took a deep breath. No. Go and avoid trouble. I know how to deal with these monsters now. But if I have to take care of you guys, I'm afraid I won't be able to. You guys go to Peng Lai Palace. Avoid trouble and look after the clear water for me. Everyone was stunned. But Lu Gongzan was the first to react. He noticed a word in Li Yunxin's words. He frowned. Brother Xan, these? At this moment, the sea that had calmed down suddenly became stormy again. After Lu Gongzan asked this question, countless black humanoid figures suddenly appeared on the surface of the sea far away. Every one of them was the same as the monster they killed after a fierce battle. Chapter 774. The seawater was already dyed black by the blood of the first monster. Now thick dark clouds had once again gathered above the pitch-black ocean. Those were also clouds formed by the aura of the netherworld. If the aura of the netherworld only made people feel a little uncomfortable when the first monster appeared, then now, the entire Peng Lai Sea seemed to have become the world of the netherworld. On the boundless black ocean, hundreds of monsters were moving toward Peng Lai Island. They were silent, but every step they took seemed to make the entire ocean tremble. Looking from afar, in the endless black fog, the dozens of blood-red eyes on the heads and torsos of the monsters looked like densely packed lanterns. Apart from Li Yunxin, the other four were dumbstruck by the scene. Li Yunxin only used less than half an hour to kill the first monster, and it was a great victory. But that was under the premise that he and Daoist Qingshui did their best. That monster was extremely difficult to deal with. Red Lady and Lu Gongzan all thought that it was a rare general under the command of Ancestor 10,000 years. Otherwise, how could such a powerful existence come from the ocean? If this monster was on Cloud Mountain, it would be at the level of a sect master or a grandmaster. But now, suddenly hundreds of such existences appeared from the ocean. Their first thought was, this was definitely not the doing of Ancestor 10,000 years. Even a 10,000-year-old ancestor would be buried alive if he were to personally come. Daoist Qingshui? Daoist Qingshui? She controls the Dragon Island, she can hear everyone's words clearly. The place where the monsters appeared wasn't far from Peng Lai Island. Qingshui sensed that they were coming, so he immediately returned to the Dragon Island. Lu Gongzan shouted in a low voice and sighed at the same time, we did something stupid before. Only the current Li Yunxin stood proudly in the sky. His snow-white clothes were fluttering in the strong wind, but there wasn't a trace of panic on his face. It's not too late. He smiled and said in a low voice, if Qingshui wants revenge, he has to kill me first. You guys go to Peng Lai to avoid the disaster. I'll stay here and deal with them. She must like to see it. Even the ninth young master realized what Li Yunxin was talking about. Then aren't we the hostages she used to threaten you? He yelled, leaving us in Peng Lai Island and letting you fight for your life here? If that's the case, she's underestimating our ambition. I know your ambitions, Li Yunxin looked at the ninth young master. But I also know that I don't like another thing. One of them used his own body to block the door to stop the pursuers and told the other to leave quickly. That person refused to leave and shouted, and then the two of them were killed together. This kind of ending is too stupid. It doesn't suit me. The ninth young master widened his eyes and wanted to say something, but Li Yunxin had already turned his face away. You talk to them. Lu Gongzan didn't say anything immediately. He knew what Li Yunxin's decision meant. He wanted to refine the netherworld. That monster was strong, but the netherworld aura that escaped from its body was far from enough for him to refine himself. Li Yunxin had said that he planned to start this process when he was fighting against the 10,000-year ancestor. But because of the appearance of the monsters, the plan was brought forward. Now so many monsters appeared, and the netherworld aura they brought covered the sky and the sun. The entire expanse of the sea seemed to have become a real netherworld. Although there were many of them, each of them was only at the peak of the mysterious realm. Fighting and refining them was actually a little less dangerous than facing the more cunning and powerful 10,000-year ancestor. But it was just a little less. For the current Li Yunxin, these people were indeed burdens. If they didn't care about their own lives, even the ninth young master might be able to seriously injure one of the monsters. But even if the four of them killed 4, 5, or even dozens or hundreds of monsters, they would eventually be weakened because they were in the netherworld and couldn't circulate their spiritual power smoothly. Li Yunxin wouldn't just sit and watch them die. He would have to divert his attention to rescue them. That would put him in danger as well. However, Lu Gongzan also knew what it meant for Li Yunxin to refine the netherworld. It meant that he couldn't stay on this land anymore, and should go to the netherworld. This might be the last battle they would fight side by side. He pondered for a long time, not knowing how to express his feelings. Logically speaking, he should leave immediately. But how could he leave Li Yunxin here alone? At this moment, Bai Yunxin spoke. Okay, let's go. Don't distract him. The female monster in white didn't speak much from beginning to end, but now she was unusually decisive. I'll go back to Penglai Island and try to contact my adoptive father. Maybe it's not too late. Li Yunxin looked at the ninth young master seriously. Ninth young master, go back. Little Nine wanted to say more, but Lu Gongzan finally said, Ninth young master, listen to Brother Xen. Everyone knew how close the relationship between Li Yunxin and Lu Gongzan was. Now that he said so, the ninth young master was stunned. Although his temperament was like that of a child, he was not stupid after all. After experiencing so many things, he gradually understood the principle of being a human. He finally stopped staring and stayed silent in the air for a while. Then he looked up to the sky and shouted, I only hate myself. He turned around and wanted to leave, but Li Yunxin said, wait. The ninth young master's face lit up. He quickly turned around and said, why you? Li Yunxin smiled. Seeing him like this, anyone would feel warmth in their heart. He rummaged around in his sleeve and took out a bead that was surrounded by dense mist. Ninth young master, this is called Misty Lock Toad Palace. Li Yunxin gently waved her hand, and the pearls slowly floated to ninth young master. Although we had our disagreements in the past, we are still friends. Although we had some unhappiness in the past, I know your character and I like it. I can't ask you to go further now. I don't want to ask you to go further. Because you are forthright and don't care about trifles. But in the current world, this kind of character is the most unpopular. The current dragon clan had already declined. When you travel the world in the future, you should have something else without the fame of the dragons. This thing has endless changes and can create all kinds of illusions. In this illusion you are the master. Hearing Li Yunxin's words, the ninth young master held the bead and said happily, you want to give it to me? I know this thing. I know you have used it before. It is for you. The spell has been attached to the bead. With your intelligence you can understand it in a few days. And this one. Li Yunxin said and took out another thing from his sleeve. This thing was not as magical as the Misty Lock Toad Palace. But it was also a treasure that Li Yunxin had plundered from the Cloud Mountain treasure house. It was a sword array made up of 81 small swords. Treasures like sword arrays were very common. Because it could be used to attack and defend, and could be controlled with one's mind, it was like having dozens of arms. Li Yunxin had obtained many treasures like this in the past, but he had used most of them. Now there were not many left. He gave the treasure to the ninth young master and said, I don't have many things with me now. This is one of the few that I can take out. I don't have the spell. It will be best if you can get it in the future. But even if you can't get it, you can use it as an extra 81 arms. If you meet someone with a similar realm as you, bully him to death. If you meet someone you can't beat, hold him back and escape. It is a good thing. The ninth young master held the treasure and slowly realized something. The joy on his face faded and he stopped talking. Li Yunxin looked at him and smiled, eat less people. If I had been eaten by you, we wouldn't be friends now. Humans are different from animals. This person might surprise you. The ninth young master frowned deeply. After a long time he said, okay. From now on I won't eat any of them. Li Yunxin looked at Lu Gongzan again. With a wave of his big sleeve, 4 or 5 treasures from Cloud Mountain were sent to him. You already have a lot of treasures. Don't bite off more than you can chew. These are for you. Lu Gongzan didn't say anything. He took the treasures and put them in his sleeve. Li Yunxin looked at him for a while and said, Old Lu. I am most fortunate to meet you in this world. Without you I wouldn't be who I am today. Lu Gongzan looked at him solemnly and still didn't say anything. He just nodded gently. Li Yunxin looked at Bai Yunxin again. He was about to speak when the silent red lady suddenly said, "Give me the rest." After saying this he looked at Bai Yunxin and said, "You have a golden rock as your adoptive father, so you don't lack these things." Bai Yunxin smiled and said, "Okay. I won't compete with you." Red lady looked at Li Yunxin and said, "You can ask them to leave but you can't ask me to leave. I fell in love with you at the first sight of you." Red lady's clothes were also fluttering in the wind. When speaking she looked straight at Li Yunxin and didn't let him avoid her eyes. "At that time in Dongting, you said that the woman you liked should be independent and strong, and an interesting soul. I know I am a mediocre person and not interesting in your eyes. But I asked myself to be independent and strong. I am a ghost cultivator. Everything in this body is now entrusted to you. If you die, my obsession will also dissipate. I will also die. In this case I can't leave. I stay to help you and save myself. If you ask me to leave I will die in front of you now." Li Yunxin looked at her eyes. Then he laughed and said softly, "Okay." He waved his hand. More than a dozen of the remaining treasures of the saints were sent to Li Xinyu. Lu Gongzan sighed and turned to go straight to the hall of Penglai Island. The ninth young master solemnly cupped his hands and saluted to Red Lady, "Little sister, take care." At this time about 400 or 500 powerful monsters had already approached Penglai Island. Because of the huge waves they raised when they moved, the whole huge Penglai Island looked like a small boat in the stormy waves. Red Lady took the magic treasure in her hand and gave a light shout. A powerful breath immediately spread out, reflecting golden light around her, as if a round of blazing sun also rose on her body, exactly the same as when Li Yunxin reached the peak of the mysterious realm. This scene and what they just said were all seen and heard by Taoist Qingshui. She and Taoist Zai stood in the hall of Penglai Island, but the wall became transparent. She could not only hear and see everything outside, but also clearly observe the appearance of those monsters. There were a total of 441 monsters. They didn't emerge from the ground but directly condensed in the sea. Previously they suspected that the first monster was a general created by the 10,000-year ancestor with a secret method, but now they knew it was not the case. No matter how powerful the 10,000-year ancestor was, he couldn't condense a human form with the netherworld aura. When she came to Penglai Island, she used her own cultivation to forcibly raise the realm of the Taoist Zai, which was already an amazing method. But even so, there must be a foundation and a core to rely on. When the art Saint Qining painted Shinryu, he spent a lot of effort to create a core, otherwise she wouldn't exist at all. But the mastermind behind the creation of these monsters, the means used subverted all common sense. In other people's eyes, the monsters themselves were extremely terrifying. But in Taoist Qingshui's eyes, the monsters appearing out of thin air was the real horror. Such a discovery made her excited. Taoist Zai noticed her abnormality and asked with concern, "Master, what's wrong?" Taoist Qingshui sighed in a low voice and covered up her worries with one sentence. "My evaluation of Li Yunxin is indeed correct." The Taoist Zai didn't understand, so he nodded. Taoist Qingshui sneered. "Li Xinyu must have been enlightened by the method I used just now. The power of the dragon soul in her body is far beyond the peak of the profound realm. She didn't know how to use it before, but now she does. I gathered all of my spiritual power, and she released all of the power in the dragon soul. This was a suicidal way of fighting. Li Yunxin should thank me. When I met Li Xinyu by the East Sea, I told her, if she continues to keep the dragon soul in her body, her consciousness will be devoured by it. If she separates the dragon soul, she won't be able to live. Because in essence she is already a corpse. It is the dragon soul that allows her, a walking corpse, to exist in this world. Even now, Li Yunxin doesn't have any plans for her. He is still thinking of using her. Li Xinyu, this crazy woman, is willing to be used. She even comforts herself that it is because of love. Taoist Qingshui sneered. There is no love in this world. When she said the last sentence, her tone gradually turned cold. The Purple Knight Taoist's heart skipped a beat. He was silent for a while and couldn't help but say, "Master? You told Li Yunxin about the past with Chen Zhao. I want to know what happened in the end." Taoist Qingshui glanced at him. "In the end? Chen Zhao went to the netherworld. Isn't that the end?" She raised her head and stared at Li Yunxin's figure. "It's the same as this person. For his so-called pursuit and goal, he used everyone around him, left everyone around him, and went to the netherworld. She was silent for a while and said softly, "It is indeed a good place for them." Chapter 775. Zai Jinren had never seen her like this. He was hiding in the lifeless immortal sect. Although he didn't meet Daoist Qingshui often, he thought he was her confidant because he had an important mission. When he had met her occasionally before, he had seen her graceful bearing, and he had seen her occasionally true nature. But no matter how sincere she was like a goddess in the clouds. All her worries were like floating clouds to her, and they were trampled under her feet. But now she had revealed another side of her. Because of the previous battle, she lost a lot of spiritual power. The loss of power also made her unable to calm down. She had strong feelings of love and hate just like a mortal. Zai Jinren liked this kind of love and hate. This made her not as unreachable as she used to be. He couldn't help but ask, "Master, what's your plan after this battle?" Daoist Qingshui looked at him. Zai Jinren couldn't read the meaning in her eyes. "Why do you ask?" He hesitated for a while, looking at the monsters outside who were getting closer and closer, Red Lady who was shining with golden light, and Li Yunxin whose sleeves were fluttering, and then said, "What we have been doing these days is not like Master's style. I used to hide everywhere, push the waves and control the situation. I've been operating on the land for a long time. I have a solid foundation. But now Master abandoned everything on the land and came to Dragon Island. I'm the only one by her side. My brothers who were with the 10,000-year-old ancestor have all died. I've lost a lot of vitality. But Master doesn't seem to care. It wasn't like this in the past. Thus, I feel that Master seems to have made up his mind. That's why I asked." Zai Jinren said softly, "Does Master plan to withdraw from these mundane matters in the future?" Daoist Qingshui smiled mysteriously and looked at him. "What if I really want to withdraw?" Zai Jinren said in a deep voice, "If that's the case, I'm willing to stay by Master's side." Daoist Qingshui laughed loudly. But after laughing for a while she suddenly coughed. This made Zai Jinren's heart turn cold. He only knew that Daoist Qingshui had lost some vitality, but he didn't expect it to be this serious. She actually showed signs of decline. She coughed a few times before restraining her smile. She faintly said, "Do you think I can leave this sea alive?" These words were like a clap of thunder that exploded in Daoist Violet Knight's heart. He was stunned for a moment. "What do you mean, Master?" "Li Yunxin will definitely kill me," Daoist Qingshui said calmly. "He refined the netherworld and wanted to go down there. How can you feel at ease staying on top of me?" Daoist Master Zai was momentarily speechless. He could only frown and stare at her in a daze. Not because of anything else but because it should have been more than that. She obtained the Dragon Island from Li Yunxin. She already had the upper hand. Even if the 10,000-year-old ancestor turned into a devil, she could stay on the Dragon Island. It would be hard for that old devil to break through. How could something that could suppress the netherworld chi underground be destroyed so easily? The initiative should have been in her hands. But before this, she had actually helped Li Yunxin fight with all her might, causing her to be heavily injured to such an extent. Daoist Master Violet Knight had thought that his master had her own plans, but now it seemed that she had no other choice and was certain that she would not be able to escape death. Why would she do such a thing? It seemed like she was asking for death. But not long ago, she was clearly in high spirits because she had regained the Dragon Island. His mind was in a mess. He could only say, "Then why didn't Master leave?" Daoist Qingshui smiled. "I'm leaving." Daoist Master Zai wanted to ask again, but Lu Gongzan and the others had already entered the main hall. Daoist Qingshui's expression became serious. She kept her mouth shut. Her figure flashed and disappeared into the void. She had returned to the Dragon Island. Looking outside of the main hall of Penglai Island, one would see that the sky and the sea had become completely dark. The thick netherworld chi covered the sky. It was almost impossible to see one's fingers in front of them. In the deep darkness, the red light reflected by the hundreds of monsters' blood-red eyes was especially terrifying. The light on Red Lady's body had reached its peak. Li Yunxin was standing beside her. As the monsters got closer, she took a deep breath. "I'm going." When she said this, her voice sounded a bit ethereal. It was sometimes near and far. It was as if one word was said right in front of them, and the next word was said from the other side of the sky. This was because the spiritual power and the netherworld chi had already collided. Another fierce battle had started before the two of them. When these two auras collided, even the space was affected and became slightly distorted. But suddenly she heard Li Yunxin say in a low voice, "Wait." Red Lady was startled. She quickly heard another sentence. Because of the conflict of spiritual power and the distortion of space, this sentence was even more vague and ethereal. But she was sure that she didn't hear wrongly. You have to do your best later, you have to die in battle. Li Yunxin didn't look at her, it was more like he was talking to himself. But when you die, don't be too far away from me. I know about your matter. Red Lady knew that Li Yunxin chose this kind of time to speak to her in such a low and vague tone because he was worried that their conversation would be heard by Daoist Qing Shui. She also knew that since he was worried, she shouldn't ask too much. However, a strong emotion was fermenting in her chest. She couldn't help but look at Li Yunxin. What do you know? Li Yunxin turned his face and looked at her. His face was faintly discernible in the increasingly thick black fog. Do you think I will watch you die? Go. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately turned into a golden light and rushed toward the enemy. Red Lady was stunned for a long time. However, she already understood a lot of things in her heart. Many of her previous doubts and worries disappeared because of these few words of his. Her previous determination to die had weakened a lot, but her fighting spirit was stronger. Li Yunxin's current realm had reached an indescribable level. Although he didn't have the ability of Grand Supreme, he was far from the peak of the Shen realm. Even though he had just reached the initial stage of the realm, his foundation was as stable as if it had been tempered for thousands of years because of the majestic spiritual power that Daoist Qing Shui had given him. As soon as he rushed into the enemy group, he fiercely confronted a monster head-on. That monster was slow and only had time to raise its hand to block, but it was hit right in the chest. More than a dozen pairs of eyes were immediately broken along with its body, and half of its body was blown up. With his current strength, if he encountered the first monster that appeared just now, he could probably end the battle within a dozen breaths. But now it wasn't just one monster but hundreds of them. The space between the sea and the sky was full of netherworld energy, and it wasn't as dense as before. Therefore, although the first monster was blown up in half by him, it wasn't killed. Its huge body was overturned in the sea, and soon it was stepped into the water by the monsters behind it. But the power of the netherworld was abundant here, and the monster that lost half of its body would probably recover in a quarter of an hour. However, Li Yunxin didn't seem to care about this. He didn't slow down and he bravely hit the next monster's body, still smashing half of it. The monsters were slow, but Li Yunxin's body was small, and his speed was fast. In the blink of an eye, he flew far away among the monsters. All the monsters that were about to get close to Penglai Island were smashed by him and fell down with a rumble. Red Lady followed closely behind him. Li Yunxin told her to fight to the death, so she really without hesitation and happily walked toward death. Dragon Lady, who was at the peak of the profound realm, didn't hesitate to drive her spiritual power to the extreme. As soon as Li Yunxin rushed over, she launched a fierce attack. Although her attack wasn't as strong as Li Yunxin's, and she couldn't make a noble monster fall down with one blow, she could still beat them back, and they couldn't move forward for a while. Although there were hundreds of monsters coming to Penglai Island, there were only a few dozen leading the charge. After the two of them fought like this, the monsters couldn't move forward anymore. The two of them seemed to have made up their minds not to let them move forward even half a step. Charging from one end to the other, he quickly charged back to the other end. In this way, although a large number of monsters fell down, the netherworld aura gushing out of their bodies became more and more intense. This scene made the Purple Knight Taoist frown slightly, and he couldn't help but whisper, "This is useless." Even if the monsters that were knocked down couldn't move forward, they could always recover in the increasingly intense netherworld aura. But Li Yunxin and Red Lady's energy was limited, and they couldn't outlast them in the end. In this way they would inevitably be defeated. He turned to look at Lu Gongzan and found that this monster cultivator was now standing straight. Although they were hiding in Penglai Island, they all knew that it was only a temporary shelter, and they didn't want to get in the way of Li Yunxin. But if something really happened to the two who were fighting outside, they would eventually have to go to the battlefield. Therefore Lu Gongzan, the ninth young master, and Bai Yunxin were now fully alert, as if they were standing at the edge of the Shiraba. Even so, the Purple Knight Taoist still felt something unusual. Lu Gongzan didn't seem to be worried about the problem he had raised. He realized that this meant that Li Yunxin had another way, and Lu Gongzan knew it in his heart. Anyone who cultivated to the profound realm, as long as they were steady, wasn't stupid. Even if he followed Yun Shan's method and cultivated himself to the point where he was neither a human nor a ghost, and looked like a fool, it was only because he was indifferent to the human world. If they really used their brains, none of them would be stupid. So the Purple Knight Taoist thought of a possibility. Li Yunxin really wanted to refine the netherworld aura. Taoist Qing Shui had told him about this before. The reason why his lord tried his best to protect Li Yunxin from death, even to the point of surpassing the peak of the profound realm, was so that he could use the method that the 10,000-year ancestor in Lin Long had used to refine himself into the netherworld aura. In this way, when facing the 10,000-year ancestor, Li Yunxin would have the power to fight. As for what would happen after that, he believed that his lord had his own arrangement. But he didn't expect that Li Yunxin would start to do this while fighting against hundreds of monsters. He did it on purpose, to let those monsters be injured but not die, so that they would release the netherworld aura in their bodies after being seriously injured so that he could refine it. But wasn't he afraid of qi deviation? Chapter 776. Although he was a disciple of Taoist Qing Shui, he didn't have a bad impression of Li Yunxin. Now that they were on the same side, he couldn't help but say in a low voice, "This is not a solution. Brother Lu, he intends to refine the netherworld aura while fighting. Do you think he is taking such a risk?" Lu Gongzan glanced at him and was about to say something. The ninth young master snorted, "It's none of your business. You should worry about your master." Taoist Master Purple Knight didn't mind and said, "He was able to absorb so much netherworld energy in such a short period of time. Even if we cultivate spiritual energy, using this method is still a tiger and wolf technique, let alone the netherworld. Brother Lu, are you really not worried?" Lu Gongzan finally said, "He has his reasons. If you and I can think clearly, Li Yunxin wouldn't be Li Yunxin. Immortal, if you want to know what methods he has, you can only waste your effort. I really don't know." The Purple Knight Immortal sighed, "I'm not," but he only sighed half of the time. Because the situation outside had changed again. They were watching Li Yunxin, Red Lady, and the group of demons fighting in the hall on the mountaintop of Penglai Island, so they had the geographical advantage. Although the monsters were huge, the crowd could still see what was behind them slightly over the heads of the fiends. Originally, there were layers of demonic shadows and dense black gas in the distance. But when the Purple Knight Immortal was halfway through his words, there suddenly burst out a very subtle light. It was as if an extremely thin bolt of lightning had flashed in the midst of the group of demons. The Purple Knight Immortal was slightly stunned. He didn't know whether the light was caused by the disorder of the spiritual power of heaven and earth, or someone was casting a spell. While he was still in a daze, a roar came from behind him. These monsters didn't like to make noise. Only when they were in extreme pain or dying would they let out an inhuman roar. Li Yunxin and Red Lady were fighting in the front. Most of the sounds were from the collision of spiritual power and the netherworld aura. There weren't many monsters' roars. Thus, the sound that came from behind was especially obvious. Lu Gongzan noticed this as well. He furrowed his brows, because after that painful roar, 3 of the monsters at the back suddenly fell. Someone was ambushing the monsters from behind. He exchanged a glance with the Violet Knight Enlightened, realizing that things might not be good. Now, on this stretch of the ocean, who else could defeat the 3-headed monster in an instant, other than the 10,000-year-old ancestor who was said to have cultivated a demonic art? Even though Li Yunxin's current cultivation level was unfathomable, he could only destroy half of a monster's body with a single palm strike. He was far from being able to defeat 3 in an instant. Before this, they all thought that it was impossible for the 10,000-year-old ancestor to appear on the surface of the ocean at this time. There was only one question: where did these monsters come from? It couldn't have been born from the bottom of the sea. There had to be a mastermind behind the scenes. Now that the monsters appeared again and again, and the mastermind behind the scenes was hiding, there must be a terrible plot. If they were the 10,000-year-old ancestor, they would have waited for the people of Penglai Island to fight with the monsters until both sides suffered heavy losses, and then the mastermind behind the scenes would show up and pick the fruits. But now they realized that they had overlooked another possibility. The 10,000-year-old ancestor cultivated a demonic body, and what he wanted most was the netherworld aura. Now that there were so many evil spirits here, and someone had to cooperate with him to defeat those monsters, he couldn't help but want a share of the loot. Lu Gongzan immediately turned to look at Bai Yunxin and the 9th young master. Things have changed. We can't wait here anymore. Previously, they hid in the hall to avoid trouble so that Li Yunxin wouldn't be distracted, so that he could focus on dealing with those monsters. But now that the 10,000-year-old ancestor appeared here, these useless people had a place to use their skills. Although the 10,000-year-old ancestor's temperament had changed, at least he still had his sanity, unlike the muddle-headed monsters. If they went out to help Li Yunxin, they could also guard against the 10,000-year-old ancestor's sneak attacks so that he could do things with peace of mind. After saying this, Lu Gongzan flew out. But previously, when they approached the wall, a passage would appear. This time, even when he stopped by the wall, there was still no change on the wall. He turned to look at the Purple Knight Immortal, then at the hall, and said in a deep voice, "Priest Qingshui, let us out." No one responded to him. He raised his hand and slammed it on the wall. With a loud bang, a turbulent wave of air surged in the room, blowing everyone's clothes and causing them to flutter violently. But the wall wasn't destroyed, not even a little bit. He realized that the priest Qingshui wanted to keep them here, so he frowned and shouted, "If Li Yunxin is defeated outside, do you think Penglai and Dragon Island can survive alone?" The ninth young master didn't have a calm temperament like him. Realizing that the situation wasn't good, he stood up and grabbed the Purple Knight Immortal's throat. On the other hand, Bai Yunxin, who had always been eccentric and even a little violent, had been silent all this time. At this moment he just looked at them coldly. The ninth young master was no match for the Purple Knight Immortal. The Purple Knight Immortal waved his hand and blocked his attack, then took a step back and hit him with his palm. The Purple Knight Immortal also shouted, "I advise you to calm down. Think carefully, will the Lord ask you to leave at this time?" Lu Gongzan raised his hand to stop the ninth young master, who was about to step forward. "What do you mean?" The Purple Knight Immortal snorted, "You should know that Li Yunxin asked you to come to the hall to be hostages. If you are here, my lord will believe that he won't run away alone. But now there are more powerful enemies. If you run out, I'm afraid that you will run away together. At that time, can Penglai and Dragon Island still exist?" He looked at Lu Gongzan. "You know better than me whether Li Yunxin would do such a thing." Lu Gongzan was stunned. He wanted to refute, but he realized that his brother Xian was indeed capable of doing such a thing. It wasn't the first time that he ran away when the situation was not good. This was indeed his style. Seeing that he didn't speak, the Purple Knight Immortal softened his tone. "I don't hate Li Yunxin. I don't even admire him. But Brother Lu, we have our own masters now. Don't blame me. I think that Li Yunxin is very powerful. Even if he faces the ancestor of the 10,000 years, he might still be able to fight. Didn't you just say that Li Yunxin has his own way of gathering the netherworld aura and I don't need to worry about him?" Lu Gongzan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He said in a muffled voice, "I didn't say that." "I said it." The ninth young master spat. "Then let's just wait and see." The Purple Knight Immortal ignored the ninth young master and only looked at Lu Gongzan. "If Li Yunxin really can't hold on, my lord won't let him die in vain. It's just that, at this time, it's all for self-preservation. Didn't all of you besiege my lord for the same reason?" Lu Gongzan frowned. He couldn't speak anymore. He could only wave his sleeves and stare at the battle in the distance with his hands behind his back. When something strange happened behind them, Li Yunxin and Red Lady also sensed it. But it wasn't because of his supernatural power. The black fog in this place isolated the spiritual power. It was like a mortal in a thick fog. It was absolutely impossible for him to sense the situation in the distance. But he couldn't see or hear far away, but he could find that these monsters had become a little strange. When Li Yunxin fought the first monster, it looked stupid like a marionette. Because of this, he could rely on his weapon and Taoist Qing Shui's spiritual power to defeat it and break through the peak of the profound realm. But now, when he fought this group of hundreds of monsters, he felt that they were different. Although their appearance and aura were the same as the first one, their movements were much more flexible. Although the first monster's movement was fast, it was stiff and slightly sluggish. These monsters' movements were smooth, and they even had some simple cooperation with each other. In fact, it was much harder to deal with than the first one. But compared to that time, Li Yunxin had also become stronger. Although they were all getting stronger, the leap from the mysterious realm of Shi to the peak of the profound realm was not something that more flexible movements and simple cooperation could compare with. Therefore, Li Yunxin and Red Lady, who risked everything and lived for death, could even slightly gain the upper hand in the short period of time when the two armies fought. Even though it was difficult to find a chance to completely destroy a monster like in the first battle because of the surrounding monsters, in a short period of time, many monsters had lost the ability to fight. Because of this, he gradually found that as the number of monsters that had lost the ability to move increased, the movements of the monsters were not as flexible as before. They began to become slightly sluggish, and their cooperation with each other was not as smooth as before. Then he realized that the demons seemed to be connected by some kind of subtle relationship. It seemed that the more the number, the stronger the ability. The fewer the number, the weaker the ability. Logically speaking, such a conclusion should not be confirmed by the information on the battle formation alone. Such an inference was also difficult for ordinary people in this world to come up with. Generally, people had to rely on their own life experience to make inferences. But even the ants and bees that lived in groups in this world had intelligence, and they were not part of a big body. If the natives here were to think about it, they would definitely not think about Li Yunxin. But the problem was that he really knew some such creatures, or civilizations. Not in this world, but in the world he came from. In the movies and TV series of that world, a big country on the other side of the Pacific Ocean was constantly invaded by alien civilizations. And 8 out of 10 of the invaders had a core organ or individual that was very important, in control of the overall situation, in which all the minions would stop functioning once they died, but they would not pay attention to defense. Li Yunxin had seen too many reunion scenes in which a squad killed the core organ, and the whole world was instantly saved. Therefore, when he discovered the strange changes of the monsters, the first thought that came to his mind was that the appearance and aura of the monsters were too similar, as if they were mass-produced products, or a swarm of ants and bees that were difficult to distinguish with the naked eye. Just as he was thinking about whether his inference was correct or not, a strange change happened on his side. The movements of the monsters suddenly became more sluggish, and their cooperation also became chaotic. Li Yunxin originally swept past a monster, frantically refining the netherworld aura into his body while avoiding its attack, and at the same time, blasting half of the monster's body away with a palm strike. Thus, the monster's body overflowed with black fog, and like a ghoul or a blood-sucking monster, he rushed to the monster's wound and absorbed all the netherworld aura that gushed out. The black fog in the monster's body could not repair the heavy injury for a while, so it could only collapse and wait for the surrounding netherworld aura to become thinner to repair its body. This process would take a long time. And when he absorbed the netherworld aura, the monsters on both sides would join forces to attack. Although these monsters had some intelligence, their minds were not as flexible as human beings. Red Lady used the momentum of wind and thunder to attract the attention of the monsters, temporarily covering for Li Yunxin. In this way the two gradually gained the upper hand, and the number of monsters that could stand at the same time gradually decreased. But they also knew that this was not the way to go. Li Yunxin's refining of himself would always have a limit. If that limit was reached but it was still not enough to form an overwhelming advantage, he would eventually be defeated. But when Lu Gongzan saw the strange change, the two realized that the monsters suddenly could not even join forces to attack anymore. Even two of the monsters' fists collided, and both of them were blasted back a step. Seeing this, Red Lady was overjoyed and shouted, "They can't do it!" But Li Yunxin suddenly rushed up to the sky and looked into the distance. He saw that the thin lightning flashed 5 times in a row. With the obstruction of the netherworld aura, he could not feel the aura behind him and could only watch. But he also understood that there should be a strong reinforcement coming. For example, he and Red Lady, both of them were even stronger, strong reinforcements. "It's the 10,000-year-old ancestor," he sneered. "Someone is coming to take advantage of us." Red Lady led the two muddle-headed monsters to the side, and then took the time to look up at him. He also wants the netherworld aura. What should we do?" Li Yunxin did not say anything, but swooped down again and plunged into the sea. Red Lady followed closely behind him. Now the seawater was dark and gloomy. The monsters poured into the sea, stirring up a huge amount of sand and sand. However, Red Lady saw that the spear in Li Yunxin's hand was emitting a faint white light. She knew that in the previous battles, it was precisely because of this sharp weapon that he was able to defeat the monsters one by one with an overwhelming force. But he did not use the spear to stab, as if he cherished this thing, but held the spear in his left hand and attacked with his right hand. Once the monsters were destroyed, he would immediately use the spear to penetrate the wounds. So the netherworld aura that gushed out from the monster's body seemed to see its master, and lingered around the spear. Therefore he was able to completely absorb it. But Red Lady had never seen him use this treasure before, and she did not know where it came from. She saw that Li Yunxin went straight to the bottom of the sea, and suddenly inserted the spear in his hand into the mud, as if he was sensing something. Then his face changed slightly. "Why are there 3 more?" Chapter 777. Red Lady stared blankly. 3 what? 10,000-year-old ancestor? 3 thieves, Li Yunxin said. The wolf spine raging lion spear had an unusual affinity with the netherworld aura. When the White Hell Lord had given this spear to him, he had guessed that it was not just a divine weapon. It was not just a simple immortal treasure. When he used this spear to stab Zither Monarch to death on Dragon Island, he had already discovered its peculiarity. Once the spear pierced Zither Monarch's body, the netherworld aura in her body was immediately sucked clean. When he wielded this spear in the dark fog, he could even feel the netherworld aura drilling into the spear. The last attack against the monster was also made with the help of this spear. When the hundreds of monsters attacked, they discovered its miraculousness. The reason why the monsters didn't attack Penglai Island was not only because of Li Yunxin and Red Lady's fierce attacks, but also because the monsters seemed to be attracted by this spear. Their main target became Li Yunxin and not Penglai Island. Thus, Li Yunxin could make them unable to attack. At this time he used this wolf spine raging lion spear to crazily absorb the netherworld aura pouring out of the monsters' bodies and refine himself. Taoist Master Zai was worried that Li Yunxin's foundation would be unstable and that he would be possessed by the devil if he refined it so quickly. But he didn't know that Li Yunxin had such a treasure. This thing only absorbed the netherworld aura and excluded the spiritual aura and other auras. Thus, Li Yunxin had a treasure house full of pure netherworld aura in his hands. Why would he need to worry about his foundation being unstable and his cultivation going berserk? The White Hell King had given him this, who asked him to guard Dragon Island and kill all the demonic creatures that appeared on land. He probably expected the current situation. The netherworld aura might fill the sky and the sea, so he could use this spear to absorb the netherworld aura. But in the end, he underestimated Li Yunxin's determination. He simply refined himself. Now that he had dived to the bottom of the sea and stabbed the spear into the mud, he originally wanted to use the earth chi to sense the aura of the existence behind the demon horde battle formation. He had foreseen the possibility that the 10,000-year ancestor would covet the netherworld aura, so he had asked Lu Gongzan to go to the island to avoid trouble. He wasn't avoiding these big monsters but the old monster. As soon as the spear pierced into the ground, the entire ocean seemed to turn into a spider web. This web of spider silk was the netherworld chi that covered the sea and sky. The aura of the netherworld gathered towards the wolf's back and lion's spear from all directions. Even though it was only a very subtle trend, it was enough to establish an even more subtle connection. Any movement on the spider web would be faithfully fed back to the center, and he and the gun were the hunters in the center of the spider web. Thus, he could sense that there were 5 other existences at the periphery of the horde of devils. The strongest among them should be a 10,000-year-old ancestor. In Li Yunxin's senses, the 10,000-year-old ancestor's power was like a bottomless well, crazily absorbing netherworld chi. The 3 weaker than him and the 10,000-year-old ancestor were lurking in the northeast of the horde of devils. They were hiding in the deep sea, also absorbing the netherworld chi, just like what Emperor Li did in the Battle of Mount Yunshan. Li Yunxin, the wolf's back and lion's back and the web woven by the netherworld chi could also sense the existence of the netherworld in their bodies. But another person who didn't belong to their category was also detected by him. The 3 weaker ones in the northeast seemed to be protecting something. Because when they moved, they were always very careful to form a triangular formation, and in the middle of the formation, there should be another person. Li Yunxin suddenly pulled the spear out of the mud and said to Red Lady, "Let's go see the 3 thieves first." After saying this, his figure flashed, rumbling straight to the northeast in the dark sea. Li Yunxin and Red Lady dived into the water, and the horde of devils suddenly seemed to be lost. Some turned around and tried to follow his breath, but were stopped by the monsters behind him. They had lost a lot of people, and their cooperation was not as smooth as before. So for a moment they were flustered and even tripped 3 or 4 of them. At this moment, Li Yunxin and Red Madam, who was following closely behind, could already sense the auras of those 3 existences. Indeed, Grandmaster D and the 3 people, who accompanied him were doing something sneaky. They were indeed crazily absorbing the netherworld chi. Different from Li Yunxin and the 10,000-year-old ancestor, they only took advantage of the ready-made advantages, and didn't take the initiative to attack. And those monsters actually regarded them as nothing, at least they regarded the 3 people as nothing, as if they thought they were the same kind. Only when Grandmaster D got too close would 1 or 2 of them turn their attention to him. At this time, the 3 people next to him surrounded him, so the monster's attention was quickly diverted. The 4 of them didn't notice the breath of Li Yunxin and Red Lady. It was not only because the netherworld chi also blocked their eyes and ears, but also because 3 of them were undergoing a shocking change, so they had no time to pay attention to them for the time being. Number 0, number 1, and number 2 were all becoming bigger. It wasn't that cultivators or demons used supernatural powers to make their bodies become bigger, but that they were growing. The netherworld chi seeped in through the gaps in the armor, and the three bodies suddenly grew bigger. The armor that covered his body seemed to be extremely sturdy and neat. But now, it actually extended along with their bodies as if it had become liquid. At first, they were only the size of ordinary people. But when the 10,000-year-old ancestor appeared, they had already grown to the height of the monster's waists. At this time, the three people under the heavy armor seemed to start to feel pain. Number 0 had always been silent. But even she began to let out a very soft moan. This sound was drowned out by the background noise, but Grandmaster D heard it. "You're almost at your limit." He was now standing on number 0's shoulder, protected by a layer of invisible power. This layer of power was very similar to the shield created by the first monster that Li Yunxin killed. It was composed of many hexagonal colorful patches, which didn't look like the style of this world. Number 0 didn't say anything, but number 3 sneered, "I've already said that I alone is enough. These two pieces of trash are a burden." Number 3 had now grown into a huge monster, even bigger than those monsters. In fact, at a glance, number 3, number 0, and number 2 looked very similar to those monsters. This was referring to their silhouettes. They were also tall but slender, like a normal person who had been stretched by an invisible hand. Number 3 hid under the deep sea, his body bent. This place was very far from Penglai Island, and the sea was much deeper than the coast of the island, so it provided a place for them to hide. If they were near Penglai Island, the sea would probably only reach their knees. And number 2, who was also called Trash, was actually not a burden. Number 2's body also grew to a huge size, almost the same as number 3's. But their mental state, or rather their fighting spirit, was completely different. Number 0 followed Grandpa D's instructions, hiding carefully and absorbing the netherworld energy. He was like an obedient and sensible good student, dutiful and well-behaved. Number 2 seemed to be cowardly, or dispirited. He was like a very intelligent person, but he was not interested in the things in front of him. He wasn't in a hurry to fill his body with the netherworld energy, but he seemed to be very strong in a certain quality. Therefore, even if he didn't work hard, his body was still growing rapidly. Number 3 was the one who was most like a normal person. She was full of fighting spirit and some kind of desire, eager to fill her body with the netherworld energy. Sometimes she would even ignore Grandpa D's orders and take the initiative to attack and defeat the monsters. But Grandpa D sighed and said patiently, "You can't deal with the 10,000-year ancestor and Li Yunxin alone. You have to learn to cooperate and you have to learn patience." Number 3 shouted with dissatisfaction, his voice full of expectation and eagerness, "Patience? How long do I have to be patient?" When Li Yunxin and the 10,000-year ancestor fight, Grandpa D said, "When one of them is defeated, that's your chance." But he heard a third voice, "I don't think you can wait until then." Li Yunxin appeared from a black fog. He stood in the deep sea where the black fog was surging. His white clothes were especially eye-catching, making people feel that they were shining. "Long time no see." Grandpa D was shocked. Then he made a movement. He quickly raised his hand and pointed in the air a few times, then looked up at Li Yunxin again. "What a surprise. Where's your female companion?" Li Yunxin tilted his head and stared at him. "She went to attract the monster's attention for us. That way we can have a good talk. Why didn't you stay in Cloud Mountain? Why did you come here to stir up trouble?" Grandpa D smiled slightly. "Compared to the last time I saw you, your state has improved and you speak with more confidence." When he said these words, none of the three giants beside him made a sound. In fact, number 0, number 1, and number 2 all looked like monsters now. They didn't have the agility of a human and seemed slow and stiff. They were like 3 trees growing at the bottom of the sea. They swayed gently and absorbed the netherworld energy between the sea and the sky as if they were absorbing the energy in the sunlight. Li Yunxin looked at the 3 of them and thought for a while. "So, you pointed at them just now to deprive them of their senses. Did you create this thing?" "Sort of." Grandpa D admitted without hesitation. "Now you..." Li Yunxin didn't give him a chance to speak. "Previously, the 10,000-year ancestor told me about something he saw 40,000 years ago. I had a guess. The Dragon Island and the 3 islands of Penglai should belong to some kind of energy equipment that can provide energy for Cloud Mountain. Now that I see you, my guess should be right. Otherwise, an elder like you who has taken over the body of a so-called sage but has no magical power would not take the risk to come to Cloud Mountain. Let me guess again, you came for the Dragon Island." You came for the Dragon Island to obtain energy. And to obtain energy, to leave this world? Grandpa D raised his eyebrows in surprise. You know so many things? What else do you know? Chapter 778. That's almost all. Li Yunxin looked at him seriously. Did you realize that we are allies now? You didn't give me a chance to speak. Grandpa D looked at Li Yunxin and the three huge bodies beside him. Li Yunxin seemed to see through his mind and said in a low voice, "These three things are not my opponents now." He looked at Grandpa D again. You are not either. He purposely showed his strong aura and forced out the dark netherworld aura from his body. Although the aura in his body belonged to the netherworld like the monsters, the aura in his body had been refined and purified. Moreover, it had a mysterious rhythm when the divine power was used, so it was easy to distinguish who was superior. This kind of aura forced the surrounding seawater away and put the four people in a dark ball. He didn't use any prohibition or magic. When he used those methods in the sky above Penglai Island, he did it for the people of Qingshui Road. Now that he needed a real secret space, he used this strong and domineering aura to cut off all connections with the outside world. He could control this power. It was like a cultivator who could consciously control the spiritual power within a few feet or even several feet around him. Therefore, the three huge bodies could no longer absorb his netherworld aura and became irritated. They even started to growl faintly. Even Zero, who never made a sound, was no exception. It seemed that because his rational consciousness was temporarily restrained, some kind of wild instinct surfaced in his sea of consciousness. Grandpa D had to raise his hand again and point in the void. The three huge bodies quieted down again. Li Yunxin shook his head. No matter how strong a heavenly weapon is, it's just a piece of scrap metal without an expert to use it. You can't use these three things as you wish right now. Even if they break through to the peak of the profound realm, they can hardly pose a threat to Ancestor 10,000 years. Our goals don't conflict, but they conflict with Ancestor 10,000 years. He looked at Grandpa D and said, You need the netherworld aura now. And I want to enter the netherworld. But if Ancestor 10,000 years succeeds, he will destroy the Dragon Island and open the netherworld. A lot of energy will be wasted and this world will be finished. He will still want Yunshan, and you won't be able to leave then. We have to work together and take what we need. Otherwise, everyone will lose. Grandpa D turned around and looked outside the enchantment created by Li Yunxin's netherworld aura. The monsters seemed to be chasing something. They were slowly but surely changing their focus and direction of action. They should be chasing after Red Lady. Li Yunxin handed the gun to her, and she became the focus of the monsters in a short period of time. Further away, the monsters continued to topple. That was the 10,000-year-old ancestor frantically plundering the netherworld energy in their bodies. But unlike those who were knocked down by Li Yunxin, none of those who were knocked down by the 10,000-year ancestor could stand up again. Because Li Yunxin only took the netherworld energy, the 10,000-year-old ancestor, who had merged with the fiend gods from the netherworld, had long given up his own consciousness. Not only was he devouring the netherworld energy, but he was also devouring the monster itself. There's still some time, Gong Di sighed softly and looked at Li Yunxin. How do you want me to cooperate with you? Just like last time, Li Yunxin said, you drive the cloud mountain over. Restrain the netherworld energy that is escaping in this area of the sea. Then, use the heaven and earth mother plate on the cloud mountain to change the earth energy here, turning this place into the netherworld on earth. This way we can eliminate the disaster and also send you away. Gong Di laughed. Li Yunxin, you did a lot of things in the cloud mountain last time. You also asked me to cooperate with you. You asked me to look after the heaven and earth mother plate for you and told others that you destroyed it. In order to cooperate with your act, I blew up the ecosystem of the 2 layers of the cloud mountain. What have I gotten up to now? Have you ever thought of asking me for a share of the things you've done here? If a third person had been here and heard the conversation between the two, he would have been able to instantly understand many of the key points that had previously puzzled him. For example, Li Yunxin was only in the true state at that time. How did he destroy the almost indestructible heaven and earth mother plate? For example, the elders of the Freemasonry were guarding the cloud mountain. Why didn't they stop him when they saw him cause such a big disaster in the cloud mountain? Also, when he fought with the Sea Dragon King on the ocean, what kind of method did he use to mobilize the aura between the sea and the sky, making it so that even the Shinryu couldn't interfere? Li Yunxin looked at him seriously and sincerely. Gong Di, you're too heartless to say such things. You're forgetful. Let me remind you of the situation at that time. You Celestials used to pass down magic to the people of this world, making a bunch of fools cultivate according to your magic. You said that in the end you could break through the void and ascend to heaven, living as long as heaven and earth. But in reality, it's asking people to cultivate their own consciousness, leaving behind only a body that has been tempered hundreds and thousands of times. Then, you used a bolt of lightning to split apart the last bit of their consciousness. You celestials entered their bodies and became the elders of the Freemasonry. But you don't have divine powers, only your bodies are stronger. When you were in the Cloud Mountain, you used some skills that seemed impressive. But now that I know about the Dragon Island, I know. Li Yunxin smiled. That wasn't your ability. You used orders to control the Cloud Mountain. That was the Cloud Mountain's ability. But even so, the range of your abilities is only limited to the little Cloud Mountain. Then, seeing that the Shenmen and the Kenzo were getting stronger and were slowly getting out of control, you plan to use your own people to replace them. But you've only done half of it and you've already realized that it's too late. You haven't told me what it is or why it's too late. You just want to destroy the orthodoxy and the mystical gate, and then leave, right? Grandpa D looked at him gloomily. I didn't say anything about that. I guessed it. Li Yunxin glanced outside again. Red Lady could still hold on. So he focused his attention on Grandpa D again. The 10,000-year ancestor said that 40,000 years ago, the Cloud Mountain sent out a message. I guess it was asking for help at that time. But not only did the reinforcements come late, they were also people like Qin Zhao. Not only did they not help you, they even ruined your plans. Taoist Qing Shui and Li Chunfeng also told me about the Great Calamity. If there really is such a thing, I guess what you meant by too late was that a great calamity was coming. You originally planned to replace all the Celestials with the bodies of the saints. But now there isn't enough time. You guys decided to leave first and don't care about the people in the sky. The Xianmen said that there hasn't been any news about the Celestials for the past 2,000 years. They were worried that they were angry. But I guess there are two other possibilities. One is that you elders cut off the connection between the Celestials and this world. The other is that your so-called Great Calamity is indeed approaching. The Celestials really can't interfere with this world anymore. Li Yunxin smiled. I'm not a native here. I don't really think of the Cloud Mountain as some immortal creation. This thing is man-made. It might have been created by the powerful civilization that you lost in the past. Now you plan to drive the Cloud Mountain away, but you lack energy. The energy is underground. It might even be the Netherworld aura. I only thought about half of these things when I was on the Cloud Mountain. But I know what you guys are afraid of. The demons hate you. The people from Southwood House want to mess with you. After the battle on the Cloud Mountain, the people from the Shenmen might want to return to the Cloud Mountain and take revenge on you. So, you worked with me to disrupt the Qi on the Mother and Earth plate, which also messed up the spiritual Qi in the world. This way, the cultivators who are most likely to threaten you will definitely not be able to recover, and the threat to you will become smaller and smaller. Such a treasure on the Cloud Mountain was destroyed. Many people will lose interest in the Cloud Mountain. You can continue to safely trap yourselves there and plan your own things. You guys will benefit much more than me. But now you say that you're helping me. Grandpa D, that's not nice. Grandpa D turned to look at Red Lady. You should go help her, not argue with me here. I don't think she can hold on for much longer. She's a death warrior. Li Yunxin stared at him. She can hold on until she dies. But you guys can't. A serious expression appeared on Grandpa D's face. But it was more like he was using this seriousness to hide the uneasiness in the depths of his emotions. Fine. You still need the Cloud Mountain this time. I promise to work with you. But this is the last time. Not enough, Li Yunxin said. I still need to know what's going on in the Netherworld. What are the true demons and ancient demons? What's Qin Zhao doing down there? What's your relationship with the people down there? It was rare for Grandpa D to look surprised in front of Li Yunxin. He raised his eyebrows and pointed at Red Lady. They gave this to you, but they didn't tell you what it is? Should they have told me? Grandpa D smiled mockingly. It seems like Li Zhen and Qin Zhao don't really trust you. Otherwise, if you knew the origin of this thing, you would know the answers to your questions. Li Yunxin cupped his hands without holding back. Then please explain to me, Grandpa D. Grandpa D was stunned. He still couldn't get used to Li Yunxin's unprincipled way of doing things. After thinking for a while, he smiled and said, Okay, I'll explain to you. We have to start from a long time ago. He exhaled softly. A long time ago, there was only one huge and powerful existence in the world. This existence is now called the Netherworld Mother. Li Yunxin thought for a while. Is it an ancient demon or a true demon? Ancient demon, Grandpa D said. Gong D said, the powerful evil demons that have appeared since prehistoric times refer to the Mother Earth of the Netherworld. Li Yunxin shook his head in disbelief. So, the meaning of the ancient demon is so straightforward? You mentioned someone called Li Zhen just now. Don't tell me he's a true demon. Grandpa D shrugged. He's a true demon. These things are for the natives of this world. Whether it's an ancient demon or a true demon, it's fine as long as they find it mysterious. Speechless, Li Yunxin raised his hand. Please continue. Chapter 779. The Nether Earth Mother was originally a muddle-headed existence. Or rather, we felt that it was muddle-headed. After it slept for a long time, another existence slowly grew out of its body. This thing was called the ancient god in the past. Gong Di suddenly said with a mocking tone, the reason why it was called a god was because it had remarkable abilities and was almost omnipotent. Later on, you know that those who aren't of my race have different intentions. The Nether Earth Mother didn't like that ancient god and wanted to kill it. The ancient god also didn't like humans and wanted to kill them. However, humans and ancient gods knew that Mother Earth wanted to kill them. Thus, this human had to fight with the ancient god and worry that one day before a victor could be decided, they would all be killed by Mother Earth. Thus, Li Yunxin frowned. Interrupt. He pointed at his feet. You mean to say that the things you mentioned happen here? This world? Exactly. Li Yunxin let out a sigh. You guys defeated the ancient god? You can say so, Gong Di said. It was a Pyrrhic victory. We defeated the ancient god. We thought we had wiped it out completely. However, it was almost a part of the Nether Earth Mother. If Mother Earth didn't die, it wouldn't die. Thus, we dismembered it and suppressed it. You should be able to guess what it was. Li Yunxin thought for a moment. The skeletons in the sea cave and the earth cave. Yes. Your spear is actually a part of that ancient god. In my story, this ancient god doesn't sound like a powerful character. However, you have to know that Mother Earth is the source of all things, and the ancient god is the first existence that was born from it. In terms of control, this ancient god is below 1 and above tens of thousands. Your spear is made from its finger bones, so it can subdue all the so-called evil devils other than them. Gong Di raised his hand and pointed outside. These things are derived from the aura of the Nether Earth Mother. The power of the ancient god is far above it. Thus, you used that spear to attack them with an irresistible force. Low-level existences like them will also be attracted by the aura of high-level existences like the ancient god. That's why your little lover can hold them back for now. Li Yunxin blinked. What Grandmaster D said might not be true, but he believed it. The first time he had come into contact with the wolf spine raging lion spear, he had indeed felt the same aura. It was vast and broad, yet it seemed to contain some human emotions and even contain some anger. It should be the remnant consciousness of the ancient god. So what's going on down there? He pointed downward. What's going on down there? Humph. Grandpa D smiled disdainfully. We have to talk about the true devil. True demon. Li Zhen. He can be considered the savior of our world. In other words, he had defeated the ancient gods. However, we paid a huge price when we defeated the ancient gods and many people died. Then, he went berserk. Li Yunxin was attracted by his story and immediately asked, Cultivation? Chi deviation? This world of yours has had these immortal Taoist techniques since the very beginning? Ah. Duke D laughed out loud. You can say that. However, Li Zhen didn't go berserk because of his cultivation. It was a demon in his heart. This person felt that with great power came great responsibility. In order to save some people, he sacrificed even more people, so he planted a demon in his heart. When he knew that he could do it again, he became so kind that he became unreasonable. You can say that he wanted to atone for his sins. He decided to save everyone's lives this time and kill the mother of the netherworld completely. So he went underground. Since many, many years ago until now, he has been fighting with the mother of the netherworld. Even now, when we are talking, he is still fighting inside. That woman, Chen Zhao, is also unreasonable. There are some people who are also unreasonable and they've all followed her underground. But you should know that no one has the obligation to accompany his stubbornness. The catastrophe I am talking about is the mother of the netherworld. It's hard to tell who will win. Once he loses, all of us will die. To us people on the ground, he has already become a demon, a true demon. He wants to drag us to death together. So you have to leave. Li Yunxin hummed and thought for a while. If I were you, I might do the same. Grandpa D's eyes brightened. I know you are a rational person. Then people like Moon Anju? Li Yunxin said, because the people underground are fighting with the mother of the netherworld so fiercely that they can't be distracted. So they control some forces on the ground to cause trouble for you and not ask you to leave? Yes, Grandpa D said. Now, I have to drag you down with me and ask you to go underground. Li Yunxin thought for a while. Your story is logical and full of emotions. It is very reasonable. Just as Grandpa D was about to speak, he heard him say, but you didn't say one thing clearly. The technology of Cloud Mountain, Dragon Island, and Penglai Island is beyond my imagination. If your previous world had such technology, why did you suppress the remains of the ancient god on this planet? He narrowed his eyes. In other words, even I can think of a more reasonable solution. For example, shoot this ancient god out. Shoot it far into deep space. You do have the ability to do so. As far as I know, some of you are traveling through the stars. There are quite a few of you. Grandpa D gritted his teeth and said, they left us behind. They ran away. Only Li Zhen. At this point he abruptly stopped speaking. Li Yunxin clapped his hands. I understand. You are the group that was left behind. This Li Zhen ran back and wanted to take all of you away. So these people in this world, are they your descendants? Reproduced? No, you are in the star realm. What kind of place is the star realm? Even if we don't talk about this, we are friends. He sneered. This Li Zhen ran back to save you. It is like a person blocking a knife for you and fighting with a gangster. But not only did you not help, you even planned to escape when he was busy. This is not kind. The people of Moon Anju did not want you to escape. I don't think it is just because of advancing and retreating together. It should be because of something more serious. Tell me, if Yunshan extracted the netherworld energy from the netherworld and left, what effect would it have on this world? Grandpa D looked at Li Yunxin angrily. You are too suspicious. What effect do you think it will have? It is just that no one is watching the ground for them. Dao Tong and the Shenmen have always said that they should take care of the people. We have done many things in this world. We even set up a ban to not allow cultivators to enter the world and cause trouble. We didn't let these people fight each other. We made this world, with this level of technology, maintain a population of more than 1 billion. What do you think it is for? People. Many people are born and many people die. Those people's souls go to the netherworld. Do you think they are really reincarnated? Only a very small part. More importantly, in the words of cultivators, it is for the true devil to replenish his vital energy so that he can continue to fight with the netherworld mother. That is why Black Baiyanjun also had a strict order. Cultivators and demons are not allowed to touch the souls of the world. But what happened now? The passage of the dead souls to the netherworld has been blocked. Even those two can't come to the ground anymore. Look at the devils around you now. This means that the netherworld mother has gained the upper hand. Li Zhen doesn't have the souls on the ground anymore, so Mother Earth can even infect the ground with her power. If we don't leave now, are we going to die with them? If we leave, they can quickly make some people to take over the ground again. What effect can it have on them? Li Yunxin frowned. Damn. I finally understand. I was wondering, why are the people of this world so useless? It has been tens of thousands of years. Their technology is still so primitive. Because the more knowledge they have, the more reactionary they are. You want them to be beasts in peace, so it is best for them to be men farming and women weaving for generations. Now that you think about it, you are really a bunch of bastards. Grandpa D frowned and waved his hand. His agitation seemed to be sincere when he said those words just now, so he didn't mind Li Yunxin's cursing. Now that you know all this, you should be clear that even if we aren't good people, Li Zhen isn't perfect either. You can leave with us and leave this world that is about to be destroyed. With you. Li Yunxin laughed coldly and shook his head. I don't dare to. I know my own limits. I know what will happen if I make friends with people like you and myself. Then don't think about using the power of Cloud Mountain, Gong Di said with a gloomy expression. At the same time, he looked at the three huge figures beside him and said, moreover, these three are not people you can deal with. A long time ago, we obtained some of the Netherworld Mother's fragments. Then, using those fragments as the foundation, we created these three things. You can say that they are humans, but you can also say that they are actually gods of the world. The three of them are even higher than the ancient gods. They are the existences closest to Mother Earth. Once they obtain enough netherworld aura, no human or demon on this earth can be their opponent. I can ask them to forcefully open the Dragon Island. That way, although it will be a little troublesome, we can solve it. Li Yunxin, don't think that I am not a person without feelings. Gong Di said in a low voice. The reason why I didn't use them before was that I still thought that those people underground are my kind. But if you force me, people can do anything for their own lives. Li Yunxin was silent for a while. Actually, there were still many questions. For example, if the so-called Dharma Tao really existed in Gong Di's previous world, then the law of that world should be different from that of his world. The higher civilization that was developed based on this should also be different from his world. It should be a mixture of technology and celestial spells. But the Cloud Mountain, Dragon Island, and Penglai that he saw were not like that. They were more like the development route of his world. Almost all of them were formed by cold machines and electric currents. He had a guess in his heart. Maybe everything that he saw now didn't originally exist in Gong Di's world. He didn't tell the whole truth, and he might even hide some key things. Then, whether the Great Tribulation that he mentioned was the Netherworld Mother or not was still open to discussion. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.